Hello!
And welcome to Let's Talk About Book, where we talk about book. And we're currently talking about The Hero of Ages.
You got it this time.
I did. I almost.
I could tell.
Yeah.
I was like, I could see it. I was gonna say it, and then I'm like, actually, I'm gonna wait and see if you.
If I acknowledge it. Yep. And we're doing chapters 14 through 24. And of course, I'm just now thinking that we didn't think about what the next section's gonna be.
I think we did actually.
Oh yeah, because we're gonna be like finishing the part.
Yep, we're gonna go through the end of the part.
Yeah, because we're on part what?
This is part 2.
Part 2. Gotcha. Yep. So yeah, this has been quite the section.
Yeah. Before we get into it, I just want to say, Wind and Truth just came out. It's
yes.
It's what the 8th, so it came out like 2 days ago. So I've read about. Well, since I've read the preview chapters, I had about 30 chapters, and then I listened to about 30 chapters at work.
Yeah.
So I'm at about chapter 60, and it's been very good, and I'm very excited for the rest of the book.
Yes. And you'll notice this week that the episode's late again. But, so, like, I started working a new job, and we've had, like, stuff been going on lately, and, like, the schedule's changed. So we're basically planning on, like, changing our, like, recording and uploading schedule to try and like make it fit better with like new schedule and whatnot.
Yeah, make it more consistent. And all that.
So it'll probably be like weekend, like Sunday.
Yeah, probably Sundays
will be the day instead of Wednesday. But we'll try and keep, we want to keep doing it because it's still fun. But we've been a little, having trouble getting it out. Because it's like when it's like the middle of the week, it's like on the weekend we have the time, but we don't want to do it.
Yeah.
We want to just like
just
chill and relax. And then it was like, we'll just do it during the week. But then during the week we're working. And so then you get home, it's like, I'm so tired.
Yep.
So, gonna try and do it on the weekend and put it out on the weekend just so it's all like, so, yeah. And I think that's kind of it.
Yeah.
Oh, we're hoping to try and put the podcast up some other places
on some
too.
other like podcast apps and stuff.
Yeah.
We're trying to figure it out. Like, don't really. We know YouTube. Like,
it's like we watch a lot of YouTube, and so like we're very like YouTube brains.
Yep.
And so like. And like YouTube, you can just make a YouTube channel for free and upload anything for free. While with like podcasting things, some of them there's like a plan. Yeah. It's like you can only like you only do so much for free. And I've been trying to like look, and also there's like 10 billion podcasting places. Yeah. The
only ones that I ever use is like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Those are the only podcasting apps I use. But I know there's like a bunch like of other ones that people use.
Yeah, because it's like like we listen to like Magnus Archives and stuff, and I know that like they were on like Acast, but they also uploaded the episodes onto YouTube, which is where I watched them. But like they didn't come out until later. Like when season 5 was coming out, I was listening to it as it came out. I was listening to it on Acast, but then it didn't come out to YouTube until like later. Yeah. Now they're all out on YouTube. Check out Magnus Archives. It's good.
So good. I need to listen to season 5 because I still haven't. But
I think we joked at one point. It's like we should do a podcast about Magnus to like make you do season 5 or whatever. But we did get like a friend of ours to listen. Like we were hanging out and like listen to the first episode.
Like you listen to similar stuff all the time. You will like it.
It's like I know. It's why I'm not listening to it. So that's sort of the news on our front.
Yeah, and I've been reading a few other books and stuff. I started reading like James I something. I need to. I don't
know. Yeah, the guy who like you were like, oh, I thought that there were more books, but there's just the one book.
So I started his one series, and I thought there was 2 books out and there was only one, and I was very sad. So I went and read his other like series. I read 2 of the other series, and they were good, but they were very Wheel of Time.
Right, yeah, you're talking about that. It's like, this is straight up Shadar Logoth.
Yeah, there was a beat for beat Shadar Logoth that was like...
Which Shadar Logoth is already so Mines of Moria.
Right.
Like, it's not exactly Mines of Moria, but... And then Holly steals your seat while you're out looking. Oh, you get out from under there.
Sorry. All right. So the author is James Islington.
Islington.
Yes. And the one that I read the first book. I think it's just like his newer series, and it's very like Roman, like aesthetically. Gotcha. And it's kind of this kid wanting to get revenge on the empire that like took down his family. And it's like a very Roman Empire like type of thing. And then it has magic. It's very good. I really, really enjoyed it. And I needed the next book.
Right.
And so this one is called The Will of the Many.
The Will of the Many.
And then the other series is, I need the series name. The Licanius trilogy is the other series of his that I've been reading.
Licanius. I'm trying to think, like, given Latin and stuff, what that would maybe... Because I'm like, lichen is like wolf. That
series is less Roman. It's more like traditional fantasy. That's like the very Wheel of Time
Gotcha.
The other one is the very Roman one.
Gotcha. Okay. Which is funny because, it's like lichen sounds like wolf.
Yeah.
Or not sounds like wolf, but like means wolf or whatever.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, I just wanted to do a little corner of what I've... what else I've been reading.
Although that might actually be Greek, not Latin, lichen, because like vulpus is wolf, I think. And lycanthrope, if it's like, that's maybe like Greek?
Yeah. Isn't like lupine? Or isn't that one as well?
Yeah, like, yes. Like lupin, because like Remus Lupin is wolf.
Right.
Because like Remus is like raised by wolves.
Yeah.
And lupus is like the genus for wolf. Oh yeah, vulpus is fox.
Yeah.
That's right. Right, because there's a different game. Or not game, because like in Harry Potter, it's like Remus Lupin is Wolf. There was like a game that I watched like Dodger play one time back in the day. It was some sort of like kind of like Phoenix Wright-esque and like, or like visual novel-esque where you're like trying to solve a mystery. And there's a guy whose name is Renard Volps, which is just Wolf.
Got you.
Essentially. Because like I think Renard, that's like French or something, because there's like Renardine, which is like wolf related, not wolf, fox related. Yeah, like Renard Volps is like fox.
Got you. Yeah,
it's like this fox character named Renard Volps, and this like Renard the fox is like a character in like French fiction or something like that. There's like a song that's like Renardine, and it's like this highwayman. And, like, in some versions of it, he's sort of implied to be, like, foxish.
Okay.
And stuff. Anyway. I just remember seeing Renard Volps, and I'm like, this is a real Remus Lupin name. But, yeah. That was back when, Dodger actually, like, uploaded to Press Hard to Continue. Now she just streams. She's, like, fully just, like, a streamer now. And maybe a VTuber?
I love it.
Yeah, I think they've been doing some VTubing.
I feel like that would be fun. Mm-hmm. Like having a VTube model or whatever. Mm-hmm. That would be very cool.
Yeah, it's like I'd probably rather do that than like show.
I would rather do that
than like be on camera. Yeah, exactly.
Like I've been on camera a little bit. Like my sister streamed like years ago, so I was on her streams a little bit. But like I feel like that would be.
Yep. Better just being a VTuber. Yep. And you get to choose what your VTubers like and all that. Yep. So. But yeah.
But yeah, I think that's probably it for our like intro and such.
Rambly intro. Yeah.
I've wanted to start to do like a segment like since this is Let's Talk About Book, it's all sorts of books. I want to talk about some of the ones because I listen to audiobooks like all day at work a lot of times, so I read a lot. So
yeah, I'm probably I've been thinking like I'm probably gonna start listening to the audiobook at work, but then it's like it'll be hard to like take notes and stuff. Right now I've just been listening to like video essays at work.
Yeah, I do like I go back and forth between books and stuff on YouTube and whatever.
Yeah, because it's like I just don't know when I'd be listening to the audiobook otherwise. Yeah, I'd have like sort of like the time. But yeah, I guess it's about time to get into the actual book.
Yeah,
part.
We'll do the epigraphs first.
Yeah, into the epigraphs. Alrighty.
So for chapter
14, which I think, as usual,
we have done before, but
we did at the end of the last one.
Ruin's consciousness was trapped by the Well of Ascension, kept mostly impotent. That night, when we discovered the well for the first time, we found something we didn't understand. a black smoke clogging one of the rooms. Though we discussed it after the fact, we couldn't decide what it was. How could we possibly have known? It was part of the body of a god, or rather, the power of a god, since the two are really the same thing. Ruin and preservation inhabited power and energy in the same way a person inhabits flesh and blood.
Yeah. Which is interesting. Like, what does that mean exactly, you know?
Yeah.
It's very much, like, interesting as, like, a thing to say, but then, like, I try and, like, figure out, like, what that actually means.
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
oh, what does that mean? I'm sure it'll be sort of, like, made more clear, especially as in this section we get some interesting, like...
Yeah.
I don't know, some interesting Vin trying to, like, figure stuff out, you know, trying to figure out what's going on. There's math. There's math involved.
There's some math involved.
Yep. Statistics. We gotta do the statistics correctly so that we get the right statistics. Yeah.
Alright, 15. The Ash. I don't think the people really understood how fortunate they were. During the 1,000 years before the collapse, they pushed the ash into rivers, piled it up outside cities, and generally let it be. They never understood that without the microbes and plants Rashek had developed to break down the ash particles, the land would quickly have been buried. Though, of course, that did eventually happen anyway.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's like, again, I'm assuming that this is Vin, who's like doing these epigraphs, but it's like, again, it's like, what is she writing them in?
Yeah.
She's talking about microbes.
Yeah.
She was, like, given knowledge of microbes from being in the well.
Yeah.
You know, because she has, like, this knowledge of, like, what Rashek did, seemingly. And it's like, oh, you know, afterwards we talked about this, and this.
Yeah.
You know, unless it's, like, someone else. I don't know who it'd be, because, like, unfortunately, I am the hero of ages.
Yeah.
Like, maybe it could be, like, Elend?
Yeah.
Or something. But, like, it really feels like it's Vin.
Yeah.
Has there been a part where it's like, oh, when I had the power, blah, 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 blah?
Hasn't specifically said anything like that.
Yeah. So it's like, it really feels like it's Vin, but also it's like, you know, this is Vin talking about stuff that Vin's not talking about in the actual chapters, but also it's like, oh, you know, you can't talk about too much of the stuff because Ruin's listening and all that jazz, you know. It's like, just gotta stay in the old noggin or go on metal, you know. So it's, yeah.
Before 16. They are called allomantic savants. Men or women who flare their metals so long and so hard that the constant influx of allomantic power transforms their very physiology. In most cases, with most metals, the effects of this are slight. Seekers, for instance, often become bronze savants without knowing it. Their range is simply expanded from burning the metal so long. Becoming a pewter savant is dangerous, as it requires pushing the body so hard in a state where one cannot feel exhaustion or pain. Most accidentally kill themselves before the process is complete, and in my opinion, the benefit isn't worth the effort. Tin savants, however, they are something special. Endowed with senses beyond what any normal allomancer would need or want, they become slaves to what they touch, hear, see, smell, and taste. Yet the abnormal power of these senses give them a distinct and interesting advantage. One could argue that, like an inquisitor who has been transformed by a hemalurgic spike, the allomantic savant is no longer human.
Yeah, because it's just like, whoever's writing these knows so much about it all.
Yep, knows a lot.
In a way that, like, Vin seemingly doesn't right now, but I don't know. I'm just like, I'm so hung up on, like, who's writing these?
Yeah.
Because it's been, like, a thing before. You know, like, first one was like, we think it's one person who's writing them, it's actually someone else. And then in the second one, it's like, it's different from the text that we have. Like, we have this text, but it's actually different because it's the real one as opposed to the changed one. And so it's like, so what's up with these? Yeah. Like, these have just been, like, full of lore, but I'm like, who's giving this to us? Who's writing this down? And, like, all the savant stuff is very interesting, and we'll get into that some once we get into, like, the actual chapter by chapter.
Yes.
But that is a very interesting sort of, like, idea. Like on top of being able to use the metal, using it a bunch, like, has an effect on you. It's very interesting. And can also maybe sort of explain some of the weird stuff that, like, the Lord Ruler and Vin can do.
Yeah.
You know? Which is like, it's not worth it to become, like, a pewter savant. But I'm like, Vin has been burning pewter...
Basically constantly for a
while now. To, like, keep from sleeping one. So it feels like she just would be one already. You know? So I'm like, I don't know. Yeah.
Ready for the next one?
Yep.
The subtlety displayed in the ash-eating microbes and enhanced plants shows that Rashek got better and better at using the power. It burned out in a matter of minutes, but to a god, minutes can pass like hours. During that time, Rashek began as an ignorant child who shoved a planet too close to the sun, grew into an adult who could create ash mounts to cool the air, then finally became a mature artisan who could develop plants and creatures for specific purposes. Mm-hmm. It also shows his mindset during the time with preservation's power. Under its influence, he was clearly in a protective mode. Instead of leveling the ash mounts and trying to push the planet back into place, he was reactive, working furiously to fix problems that he himself had caused.
Yeah, the whole thing about fixing problems that he himself had caused, I know that I, made a note about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like, oh, he's got preservation's power.
Yes.
Specifically, right here. So it's like, preservation's like trying to put a cap on ruin, maybe? Like the Well of Ascension, it's like preservation's power, and it's like keeping ruin contained.
Yeah.
It's like, does ruin have like a ruin well that's keeping preservation contained somewhere?
Yeah.
You know? I don't know. But also it's one of those things where it's like you have like ruin and preservation is one of those things where like they need to be like in a balance.
Yeah.
You know, it's not that like ruin's evil or, you know, because preservation can also perhaps be bad.
Right.
You know, so it's like, do we need just like a balance of them somehow? Like, we're going to go free preservation and then they'll just like form some kind of balance. Like I was talking about like, when I was talking about all the Kabbalistic stuff in the previous episode, where it's like these different aspects of God need to be like in balance with each other. And, you know, currently they are not. Is sort of part of the idea behind Kabbalah. And so it's like, maybe that's something that we need to do. Free them and have them be like in balance with each other or something. Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's also interesting how it's like he gets more sort of like refined control of it as the minutes go on with it. Yeah. It's like shoving a planet too close and then fixing and then fixing and then fixing. You know? So it's like, why not just pull it back, you know? Why not just, you know, undo what you just did? But it's like, nope, gotta just fix what I fixed.
Preserve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can, if you change something, you have to then preserve the change.
Yeah.
Alright.
18. Rashek didn't solve all the world's problems. In fact, with each thing he did fix, he created new issues. However, he was clever enough that every subsequent problem was smaller than the ones before it. So instead of plants that died from the distorted sun and ashy ground, we got plants that didn't provide quite enough nutrition. He did save the world. True, the near destruction was his fault in the first place, but he did an admirable job, all things considered. At least he didn't release ruin to the land as we did.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, what he did with the power was, like, you can argue about, like, he was trying to do good, and he fucked it up, but he also did the best he could to fix it. And so, like, the world that he made, you know, it's like, it's not green, it's not all these sorts of things, but it's like, it's a livable world. As opposed to sort of the dying world. But then he continued to use the power to then, like, control and subjugate everyone. And he's like, the only way this can work is if I control and subjugate everyone. When, in fact, that's not the only way this could have worked. Like, all of the changing the world stuff that Rashek did is morally a bit more neutral than, like, everything he sort of did after. Because then after he left himself with the power, with this, like, godlike power of, like, the whole allomancy, you know, allomancy mixed with ferochemy,
and, like, him became, this, like, paranoid about that existing.
Exactly, and so it's like, it becomes, like, big thing, and then he's, like, controlling the world with this power that he has, and it's like, yeah, because it's like, because, like, allomancy seemingly showed up with the Lord Ruler, and he was, like, giving it to people, because there's, like, the metal that makes you an allomancer. Where did that come from? Like, where did the metal that makes you an allomancer come from? Because it's, like, a bit of, like, because they also describe that as being part of, like, the power of preservation. Yeah, it's like, what's up with that? Right? Because it's like, no one else seemed to have it before, and then he gets it. And so it's like, he gets to the well, and he, like, does save the world, but then he gets this power that he can then use to conquer the world. And the conquering the world and the saving the world are kind of like two separate things. Right. So it's like, Rashek was trying to do good, and in some ways did do good, but then also did evil. But it's like, yeah, but I saved the world. So it's like part of the whole thing before was like, no, I saved the world and I deserve all this stuff. It's like, well, he did save us after all. It's like, yes, he did. He did in his own way save us from like the mist and all this sort of stuff. And then, I'm sure he's like, well, once it comes back, I can try and like fix all these things that like, happen in the meantime. He's like, because I'll know how to control it.
How to do it, yeah.
But then that requires him... But then, like, the problem is that he's going about it through this sort of, like, harsh dictatorial way when he didn't have to do that. Like, he was going to be immortal either way.
Yeah.
He could have just hung around and been immortal at the well and let humanity do its thing otherwise.
Yeah. Yep.
And adapt to these, like, changes. And then just be like a hermit, like, living next to the well, being like, yep, eventually this will refill and I'll hopefully fix everything that I can, like, get another shot at this and, like, make things better. But instead he's like, I will become the God King instead and build my kingdom on top of this well.
Yeah.
Yep. Or even just sort of, like, because he spends all this like time like doing all of his God King shenanigans, and it's like that wasn't necessary for saving the world. You think it is because you have this sort of like the supremacist mindset, this sort of like me first mindset.
Right. Then he kind of buys his own.
Mm-hmm. He buys his own hype.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. That's there's a bit from Dragon Ball Z Abridged. Where it's like Vegeta says something and Trunks, who's his son, it's like, have you really like bought your own hype that much? I am the hype. Yep.
Lord
Ruler.
That's absolutely,
I am the hype.
That is absolutely the Lord Ruler.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Yep. All right, next one.
All right, for 19.
Yep.
Yes, the ash was black. No, it should not have been. Most common ash has a dark component, but it is as much gray or white as it is black. Ash from the ash mounts, it was different. Like the mists, the ash covering our land was not natural. Perhaps it was the influence of Ruin's power, as black as preservation was white. Or perhaps it was the nature of the ash mounts, which were designed and created specifically to blast ash and smoke into the sky.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I don't know what to do with that exactly. Yeah. Although it is interesting to think that, like, the ash is, like, straight up freaking Vanta black,
Yeah.
Just, like, darker than black,
Yeah. And that's the kind of, like visual that you, like, get, like, especially in, like, the first book is kind of, like, the black, like, ash on, like, the tops of the buildings, like, kind of turning the top black and then fading to, like, a more white at the bottom.
Right. Yeah, I'm bad at, like, keeping the sort of, like, visuals in my head as I'm reading.
Yeah.
I don't, like, think about it too much. Yeah. I'm real bad about that because the thing is that people will be like, oh, yeah, like, I have such a specific visual in my head for this book or whatever, and I'm like, I don't.
I can visualize a lot of things. I don't visualize characters and their faces all that well. Mm-hmm. Like, everything else, I have a lot better visual on, but, like, when it comes to actual, like, character looks, a lot of times they're very kind of blank to me.
Weirdly, I have like a pretty strong visual in my head as to what the Koloss would look like. And I have some for like perhaps the Khandra.
Yeah.
For what the Khandra might look like with like the bones and stuff. Partially, it's just like, and like Vin has been on like some of the book covers and stuff that have like an illustration for Vin. And so I kind of have like an image of Vin, but like a lot of times, like, I don't have, like, strong images for things in books. So it's just kind of like, like, oh, here's a cool visual. I'm like, wow, that is cool. And then I just forget it, you know?
All right. 20?
20.
That's 21. Where's 20? More than one person reported feeling a sapient hatred in the mists. This is not necessarily related to the mists killing people. For most, even those it struck down, the mists seem merely a weather phenomenon. No more sapient or vengeful than a terrible disease. For some few, however, there was more. Those it favored, it swirled around. Those it swirled around. Those it was hostile to, it pulled away from. Some felt peace within it, others hatred. It all came down to Ruin's subtle touch and how much one responded to his promptings.
See, I don't quite get that, though. Like, part of me, because if it's like, preservation's white, and Ruin's black, potentially, but, like, it seems like it'd be the other way around, I guess, maybe. Ruin's white and preservation's black, because it seems like the ash, that came from the power of preservation, making the ash mounds.
Yeah.
Because it's like the mist, I can't tell if the mist is like ruin or preservation. It seems both. Like, in the first book, the mist spirit thing was trying to keep Vin from, like, freeing Ruin.
Yeah, in book 2.
In book 2.
Yeah.
And like, but then it's like, oh, the feeling of hatred from the mist is, like, something to do with Ruin.
Yeah.
And also the mist is, like, the deepness, which is, like, seemingly has to do with Ruin, question mark? So, like, I don't get it. Like, I just don't get it. Like, I don't know. It's unclear to me. Like, is the mist have to do with Ruin? Does it have to do with preservation?
Yeah.
The Alamancy Mistman seem to have to do with preservation, maybe?
Yeah.
But then it's like, you know, Ruin, I don't know, like, was the Alamancy Mistman actually trying to keep them from doing the freeing Ruin, or was it reverse psychologying them into freeing Ruin? Like, what's happening here? Like, what is the deal with the mist?
Yeah.
She drew on the mist one time to do some shit, and, like, it was shit that, like, the Lord Ruler seems to just be able to do, so could the Lord Ruler draw on the mist? Allomancers, when they do allomancy, the mist swirls around them.
Yeah.
Some people who it likes, it swirls around them, while others, it, like, pulls away, and Vin feels like it's pulling away.
Yeah.
And it's like, why? What's... I don't, like...
Fair.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Fair.
Yeah, so that's where I'm at right now,
Yep,
with regards to the mist.
That sounds about right. Yep. What is up with the mist? All right. It should be no surprise that Elend became such a It should be no surprise that Elend became such a powerful allomancer. It is a well-documented fact, though that documentation wasn't available to most, that allomancers were much stronger during the early days of the Final Empire. In those days, an allomancer didn't need Duralumin to take control of a Khandra or Koloss. A simple push or pull on the emotions was enough. In fact, this ability was one of the main reasons that the Khandra devised their contracts with the humans, for at the time, not only Mistborn, but Soothers and Riders could take control of them at the merest of whims.
Yeah, I don't really have much to say about that, because we already, like, knew that.
Yeah.
You know, or it's sort of like, oh yeah, no, of course he's so powerful. It's, you know, the original shit.
Yeah.
And they've been, like, you know, we already kind of, like, have been over that. With, like, oh yeah, Elend, new Allomancer, and he's so powerful. Like that came up in, like, the chapters before, essentially. And this is just kind of, like, confirmation, I guess. These are such long epigraphs.
Yep. The beads of metal found at the well, beads that made men into Mistborn, were the reasons allomancers used to be more powerful. Those first Mistborn were as Elend Venture became, possessing a primal power, which was then passed down through the lines of the nobility, weakening a bit with each generation. The Lord Ruler was one of these ancient allomancers, his power pure and unadulterated by time and breeding. That is part of why he was so mighty compared to other Mistborn, though admittedly, his ability to mix feruchemy and allomancy was what produced many of his most spectacular abilities. Still, it is interesting to me that one of his divine powers, his essential allomantic strength, was something every one of the original 9 allomancers possessed.
Yeah, and his original 9 allomancers is interesting. Like, there's... How do you know there was 9 of them, right? Like,
yeah.
How do you know that there was 9 originally? Where does that knowledge come from?
Yeah.
And also, what's the deal with mistings? Like, that, like, it makes people Mistborn.
Yeah.
But, like, mistings who only know how to use 1, why do they only know how to use 1?
Yeah, I think that comes with the, like, dilution or whatever.
Right, but it's still just, like,
yeah.
It's just kind of odd that it's, like, just 1.
Just, yeah.
Right? But it's, like, because in the chapters some shit happens involving that, like, complicates things. So it's like, I don't know. Fucking, yeah.
Alright. During the early days of Kelsier's original plan, I remember how much he confused us all with his mysterious 11th metal. He claimed that there were legends of a mystical metal that would let one slay the Lord Ruler, and that Kelsier had located that metal through intense research. Nobody really knew what he did in the years between his escape from the pits of Hathsen and his return to Luthadel, When pressed, he simply said that he had been in the West. Somehow, in his wanderings, he discovered stories that no keeper had ever heard. Most of the crew didn't know what to make of the legends he spoke of. This might have been the first seed that made even his oldest friends begin to question his leadership.
More Jesus shit. You know, the whole, like, the time between Jesus being a child and being an adult. What was he doing? And some people like, oh yeah, he was out east, learning, like, Eastern esoteric shit, essentially.
Got you.
That's a common one that I've heard. I think that comes up in some of the, like, Apocrypha or something.
Got you.
That's, like, he was, like, out east or whatever, learning shit. I don't know. It kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah.
And also there's, like, I mean, I don't think this is the same at all. But the whole Mormon thing about, like, Jesus going out west to America or whatever.
Yeah.
But, you know, which does sort of come after Jesus died.
Yeah.
He died and then he went out that way. So, like, it kind of works. But, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because there's a whole aspect of, like, the religion of, like, oh, yeah, Kelsier died in the pits and came back the survivor.
Yeah,
essentially.
I now believe that Kelsier's stories, legends, and prophecies about the 11th metal were fabricated by Ruin. Kelsier was looking for a way to kill the Lord Ruler, and Ruin, ever subtle, provided that way. That secret was indeed crucial. Kelsier's 11th metal provided the clue we needed to defeat the Lord Ruler. However, even in this we were manipulated. The Lord Ruler knew Ruin's goals, and would never have released him from the Well of Ascension. So Ruin needed other pawns, and for that to happen, the Lord Ruler needed to die. Our greatest victory was shaped by Ruin's subtle fingers.
Yeah, and that's interesting. It's like, on the one hand, it kind of like, you know, it feels bad in the sense of it's like, we did this, but then it was actually Ruin, and also it's like, the big bad wanted us to take, it's like, he was a bad guy. We needed to take him out, but there was, like, other shit that we just didn't know about.
Yeah.
But also, he didn't tell anyone about. Because the thing, if he could have told people about it. Like, he was the only person who had this info, and, like, he could have shared the info. There's a lot, I feel like there's a lot of stuff in here about, like, sharing info with, like, the keepers. The keepers are all about, like, sharing information, but there's also a lot of sort of, like, hoarding information and having secrets and all that jazz, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, but also it's like, you knew about all this, and you could have put it in metal because you knew that was fine.
Yeah.
So it's like, you could have, like, disseminated information and in a way that was actually trustworthy.
Yeah.
And, like, you know, It's like, the Lord Ruler was trying to, like, the Lord Ruler was an edgelord. He was one of those people who's like, I can only trust myself.
Yeah.
So he was like, I can't trust anyone else with this information. I can't trust anyone else to rule, anyone else to have power. Yeah. I have to be the one who's in charge. You know, it's like, I don't know, it's just like, I see, like, people online sometimes who it's like, if I were in X, Y, and Z world, here's how I would min-max the system, because they know the rules of the world, because it's like a piece of media. And it's like, the Lord Ruler's like, oh, I kind of know the rules of the world now, because I did all this shit. And he's like, I can min-max this world, and I can put myself at the top, and I can subjugate everyone else. Yeah. And if I just rule everything with an iron fist, it'll be okay.
Yeah.
It's like, he's that type, which, again, I also feel like is how Blackbeard kind of is in One Piece. He's a little bit of that sort of, like, I can, min-max my way to victory.
Yeah.
No real friends, just using people.
Yeah.
And that's a very similar thing with like the Lord Ruler didn't have anyone.
No.
Like there was no one close to him.
Even like him from the past, like what we know from Quan.
Yep.
Right. It like he wasn't loved by a lot. He wasn't like a very beloved person.
Right.
He was sent because he was kind of unstable.
Yep.
As like a last resort.
Right.
Yep.
It's like he didn't have anybody else. Like he had like a church around him, but that's like those aren't friends. Those are devoted followers, kind of.
Yeah.
Also, it's like Ruin can just straight up control Marsh. It's like, what's up with that?
Yeah.
Anyway. It's just like, could like, the Lord Ruler just, like, straight up control them in that way? How can Ruin just straight up control them? What's the mechanism behind that? I'm guessing it's kind of, like, almost like a similar thing to, like, Kolos.
Yeah.
And, Kandra, but I don't know. Are they both of preservation? Because if the Koloss are of preservation, that's wild. As opposed to, you know, being of ruin, considering the whole thing about just, like, destroying and killing things, but, like, it's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then 24, I guess?
Yep. Or, well, it's the one before 25.
All right, the one before 25. Did we do? Yep. Yeah.
The balance. Is it real? We've almost forgotten this small piece of lore. Ska used to talk about it before the collapse. Philosophers discussed it a great deal in the 3rd and 4th centuries, but by Kelsier's time, it was mostly a forgotten topic. But it was real. There was a physiological difference between Ska and nobility. When the Lord Ruler altered humankind to make them more capable of dealing with ash, he changed other things as well. Some groups of people, the noblemen, were created to be less fertile, but taller, stronger, and more intelligent. Others, the Ska, were made to be shorter, hardier, and to have many children. The changes were slight, however, and after 1,000 years of interbreeding, the differences had largely been erased.
Yeah, that's such a, like, weird and funny kind of, like, aspect to it.
Yep.
Because it's, like, the balance and whatnot, and it's so funny, it's like, we've almost forgotten this little piece of lore, and it's like, you're damn right. Because, like, it shows up in, like, the first book.
Yep.
And then it's just, like, never really mentioned again. This idea of the balance. It's like, you know, like, why is it there's more Ska than there are nobility? And it's like, you know, it's sociological, you know, having more and less children and all that sort of stuff, you know, which is very much like a true thing about, like, our world.
Yeah.
When people talk about, like, rich versus poor people and having children and whatnot. But it's like, oh no, it was real, but it's not real anymore because they just interbred to such an extent that it's just, they're the same.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, it's like, even, it's a weird sort of thing. It's like, even if there actually was a difference, it's like, they were still human.
Right.
And so just over a long enough time period, it just goes away.
Yeah.
Because they're not that different. And even if they were different, they would just become the same over time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of interesting. Because it's like, Ska and human, you can't, you know.
And even with all of his, like no interbreeding, like all of that stuff, it still failed, you know?
It still
like,
just happened anyway.
Like, people are, you know.
Because I imagine if the nobles had just actually kept only being with other nobles.
Die out eventually.
Right, they die out eventually, especially if they have, like, less children, but also, like, allomancy.
Yeah.
Probably would have been, like, less affected, you know. It's like, just allomancers with allomancers. Right. The whole way.
Yeah, you'd get more mistborns, probably, than mistings.
Probably.
Or just, like, more mistborns in general.
Right, you know, because it's like, it's, like, diluted with, like, breeding over time. Yeah, if it's, like, you know, it's like, if... Because it's like, there's only 9... you know, original mistborn, then, like, you know, and if they're only having children with each other, that's not a large enough population.
Yeah.
To, like, keep that group afloat. You need to bring in other people, like, so it's like you have to have some non-mistborn breeding with them, and then, you know.
Yeah.
And if just, like, the families of those 9 were the noble families, even that's not a large enough population size to maintain a population. you need a bigger population size than that to survive, you know? It's like, that would have been, like, a major, like, evolutionary bottleneck.
Yeah.
Like, apparently cheetahs are, like, very inbred because they had a major, like, population bottleneck at one point.
Got you.
So cheetahs are very, like, inbred and stuff. Yeah. Alright, but that's the epigraphs, huh? Alrighty, so I guess it's time to move on to the chapter by chapter.
Yeah.
Alrighty, chapter 14. So I have... Spook has been flaring tin for about a year straight, and he's in Orto? ?
Yes.
It seems to be permanently enhancing his senses, has to wear blindfold during the day. Yeah. Which I have that underlined because when I was younger, I had, like, this whole thing, this, like, Avatar The Last Airbender ripoff kind of thing in my head, where it's like, you know, with like more elements than just the ones in Avatar and all that. And so it's like, the dark bender type people, they wear blindfolds because of bright sunlight kind of thing. And so then whenever I came across that in here, I was like, hey, that's fun. That's right up my alley, very specifically. But yeah, so Spook's been flaring tin for about a year now, which is quite something.
Yep.
And we know from like the epigraphs and stuff, sort of what that means. The whole the term, allomancy savant. Yes, of course, as a 10-eye, his trauma response is hypervigilance. Because we get these sort of like passages of him being like, he's like listening to everything, and he can feel and see everything, and he's like, back when, it's like all this shit went down, and I couldn't do anything, and so he's like wanting to get better, and, it's like clubs died.
Yeah.
And everything went bad, and I couldn't do anything. And so his trauma response is to be hypervigilant, to be aware of everything, looking out for danger.
To the point where it's, like, really hurting him.
Yep, it's like, what if hypervigilance was a superpower? Which I said to you at one point, you were like, Sanderson likes to...
absolutely.
likes to make trauma into superpowers. Yep. He feels responsible for Clubs' death because of, all the stuff going on. He's like, I left, I ran, and, like, I couldn't have done anything if I was there, but, like,
it feels, like, cowardly that, like, he left, even though,
Feels out of place and less useful. Because he was like, I wasn't picked by Kelsier to be a part of the team.
Right.
Clubs was picked, and I just sort of came along because I was with Clubs. Right? I just sort of like, joined by default. Like the rest of the people who were like working for Clubs who were also like, because they would just get like kind of mentioned in the background, like other people who like worked for Clubs who were also there being like smokers and things like that. Would sort of like come up occasionally in the first book, but like Spook was like the one who was named and stuff, and so it's like I've been waiting. Waiting for Spook to do something relevant. Because like in the first book, it's like Spook's just kind of like there and around, and he's just kind of like, and that's it. Like he does some stuff, but he's not like, he really isn't like Vin and the other members of the crew in terms of like having this specific thing. Like he does teach Vin some about like being a 10-eye and whatnot, but like. But then in book 2, it's like, he's just kind of hanging out. And again, it's like he's being brought, like, he's got to do something. And he kind of does something in book 2 with being a part of the whole plan, getting them out of Luthadel for the whole, like, plan to happen, the attack, and for them to be safe and all that jazz. So it's like he kind of had some stuff going on, but now we actually get, like, a Spook perspective chapter.
Because this is the first time we've been in his perspective.
This is the first time we've been in his perspective, and we actually get to like see him like doing something, and he's gonna have kind of like his own like plot line and character arc and all that sort of stuff, beyond like in the first book his character arc is just sort of like likes Vin, but Vin's like, sorry, I don't feel the same way, and he's like, yeah, I know, and he like takes it well, but there's just not like too much
like there,
and then in the next book he's like, some time has passed and he's a little bit more of like a shit teenager. He's like, he's like, fucking Clubs, whatever, I don't give a shit about my uncle, just looking for girls and shit, but now he's like, he's on like a mission, and we're like here with him in his perspective, and it's like, it's fun. He joined because he was part of Club's operation, not because Kel picked him like the rest. Here to get info on Orteau, dialect discrimination, Eastern street slang. So because there's a whole thing about like, how it's sort of discriminated against dialect. People don't like it. I'm trying to remember when exactly things happen, but the citizen ? Meeting with his aides ? Because they were saying like the citizen in the audiobook I was having like a hard time. Because I'm like, am I like mishearing that, or is that correct? The citizen. And then I'm like, the citizen? Like, just a citizen? Orteau is where the Ventures come from, which I think is something that we had heard before, but sort of being reminded of here. Used to have canals, but they're dry now. So like Spook's walking around, and there's these like empty like river beds, like canals that had come through the city and there was like water, but now they're dried up, and so now they're just sort of like the
just like
like new walkways essentially. It's like but they're like recessed down, like, you know, dried out riverbeds, and he's walking around there, and it's like it's actually easier to get around through there because there were like the canals, and to like go across the normal streets, it's like you have to like go over the canals, so you have to kind of like go like down one and then up another. He's like, I used to like try and stay above them, but then I've just been like going down in the canals because it's easier. Unclear why the canals are dry. They just kind of dried up, and we don't really know why. And I'm like, if all the canals dried up, how do y'all have like water to live? How do y'all have enough water to like live and support life and have crops and stuff? But I don't know. Because y'all are thinking about that to a certain degree in terms of like light, but like if the canals that y'all are using for transport and stuff have dried up, what about your other water sources? You know, are they just like fine? Orto's Ska took over, but they didn't stop at ousting the nobles, and now everyone lives in fear. I want more info about this. Right? Because there's a part of me that's like, you know, I don't know a ton about, like, actually, like, the Soviet Union, you know? But there's a certain sort of, like, way in which the Soviet Union gets represented, right? And it's sort of like, and this kind of reminds me of that. It's like, oh, the people uprising, it's like this noble idea, but it's like, it doesn't work. You know, and it's like, oh, you know, they went too far, and all this sort of stuff, and... You know, the way that they're, like, so against nobility that, like, no one can have anything nice. You know, under communism, you can't have any nice things. Nice things are bad. You know, he's the citizen. You know, it's like, it's something about it just feels like, is this trying to be that? I don't know. You know, I'm always a little nervous about these kinds of things. Jealous of Mistborn while walking in the slots. That's right, they're called the slots. Or he refers to them as that. Spook, he's walking around the slots. Being jealous about Mistborn and how, like, Ellen gets to be a Mistborn now and all that. Can sometimes hear a heartbeat through walls. He's like... Yeah, because he's, like, gonna go spy on, like, the citizen and stuff. And he's, like, coming up to, like, walls and listening in. He's like, oh, I don't hear anything. And it's like, he could sometimes hear, like, heartbeats on the other side of the walls. And, like, the air moving and stuff. He's just, like, super... Like, super sensitive senses. Which is, like, so cool. It's, like, I like it. And I'm, like... If you could just, like, choose to do that. But because he has to just, like, live in this. Like,
it's kind of horrible.
You know? To be, like, so sensitive like that. Because even, like, you know, you know, we're maybe, like, ADHD, autistic, something like that, you know. And there's a certain amount of, like, sensitivity that comes to, like, certain things and sensations. And to just be, like...
Always, like,
even more so. It's, it very much kind of, like, is reminiscent of that to me. But, like, without
and he, like,
some
thinks
of the
about,
other
like,
stuff.
putting his hands in his, like, pocket, and he can feel, like, the threads of, like...
Yep. And he's got, like, he was talking about, like, he also wears glasses. He wears, like, glasses under the blindfold. So the blindfold's not directly touching his eyes, so that he can keep his eyes open. So it's like kind of makeshift sunglasses. And he's kind of like, I don't think we've quite gotten to that part yet, but he's sort of pretending to be like a beggar almost. You know, he's pretending to be like blind, essentially, it would seem. With like having the blindfold on and stuff like that. Going out with the blindfold on makes you seem like you're blind. You know. Yes. Quellian, the citizen, question mark. Beldra, the citizen's sister. Orto is essentially Kelsier's pre-Vin idea of an ideal state. Not exactly, but it's got a similar ideology. The very sort of anti-noble, kill 'em all, fuck the nobility, you know, it's like... and we get this sort of like a bit more directly later, I think. But, it's very sort of like as I was listening to this, I was like, yeah, this is kind of, I think, meant to sort of be like, see if Kelsier hadn't learned to sort of like see the nobility not just as purely evil, but as like people, then like this is sort of like what kind of would have happened essentially.
What could have been.
It's sort of supposed to be that kind of thing. And I have, even though the class divide is real, you have to still work to understand the ruling class, not just blindly assume they are inhuman. When you overthrow, you can't just become the new pure in-group.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, it is a very sort of real kind of like thing, and like you can have like a very sort of like nuanced take on this, and so I'm like wondering how exactly it's going to come out, because like if it just sort of becomes nobility were bad, ska good,
right,
you know, and it just sort of becomes like a flip where it's just sort of, you know,
ska good, nobility bad,
ska good, nobility bad, then it's just sort of like we've just recreated the power structure but in reverse, and that doesn't actually like make things better. Although it's not even exactly that, because it's not like we took the nobles and made them slaves. We just completely gotten rid of them, and now everyone, and it's like, because it's like, but then they're like doing this thing where like they're trying to like track down people with like noble, with like any sort of noble ancestry and get rid of them, and that's very much like the whole thing with like trying to keep the ska and the nobility separate, that like the nobles and the obligators were doing. So it's like we're still even kind of upholding the same old ideas, but now it's just like, you know, so you got to completely dismantle the idea structure. You can't think ska and nobility. Like, we shouldn't have those categories anymore. The reality of like the situation is that those categories do still exist. People aren't just going to forget, you know, and that's sort of like one of the things that you kind of have to work with under Vin and Ellen's way of doing it. It's like, okay, the ska and the nobility, it's not just going to disappear overnight. We can't just make everyone forget, but we can't just kill all the nobles.
Right.
Because there isn't a difference between the ska and nobles. Like, Ellen knows this, Vin knows this. There was a whole thing with, like, the first book. And so it's like, you know, we can't sort of racialize this in a sense. And we have to sort of work at, like, sort of getting rid of this class divide. Ellen's doing a lot of things to, like, give money to the poor and make it so that like ska can be merchants and work for themselves and all this sort of stuff, and try to give nobility less sort of absolute power by making them the sort of like council and whatnot. But then you still have like Emperor Elend, because there's all the like fuckery that's going on, and you know, it's like there's still a part of me that's a little bit like, I still don't like quite how like, well, no, Ellen does still have to be emperor. It just can't work otherwise, you know. But I mean, also, it's kind of Vin just kind of made the executive decision to make him emperor.
She was kind of just like, I'm done with this. You're emperor now. I'm like, I'm done with this. We need to do stuff, and I can't.
Which does very much make sense with like who Vin is and like her character and stuff like that. So it's like, I'm very curious as to like how things are all sort of gonna like, how it's all going to work out by the end of this book, you know, sort of like what is right, what's the right thing to do, because we've also had this stuff with like Kolos and like, oh, we're human, and like you have Human the Kolos who's like, no, I'm human, and we're gonna like live in your cities and all this sort of stuff, and like the Khandra, we're seeing their society and how they act, and they're very much like human in a sense. Like, they're not humans, but they are, like, people, you know? And so there's very much this, like, running theme throughout of it's, like, first it's, like, nobility and ska. And then as it goes on, it's like, no, it's not even just the nobility and ska. What about the Khandra? And the Kolos? Because, like, in last one, we get, like, a lot of Khandra stuff. And being like, no, we gotta have, like, empathy between the Khandra and the humans. And now that's sort of being developed even more in this one by, like, seeing the culture. And also Kolos. Because the Kolos got kind of brought into it last time, where he's like, oh, the Khandra have, like, an affection for the Kolos. Because we were both created? Essentially. And it's, it's all very, like, you know, it's all very sort of about, like, acceptance and, like, accepting that we're all sort of, like, people and deserve these sorts of things. So it's, like, it's going in a good direction, but I'm just sort of, like, where exactly is this gonna
specifically
end up?
With, like, Urto.
Urto, and also with sort of, like, a lot of the kind of, like, class-related stuff in here.
Yep.
Like,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it's like, yes, it's good that we're all like humans, like, oh, you know, Ska nobles aren't that different,
Yep.
and we're also not even that different from like Kolos and Khandra, but like, where are we gonna like sort of wind up on the whole like political class structure of everything, you know, at the end of the day, you know. Right. So yeah, that's chapter 14. That's what I've got.
Got you.
I know that you didn't have a chance to go through and like highlight and underline and stuff, but you got anything to add on?
No, he was just kind of spying on Quellion and Beldre.
Yeah, Beldre.
Yeah.
Yep, he's just kind of spying on them.
Yep, and he like is wondering what brings her such sorrow.
Because she's always so like sad and shit.
Yep, I think that's it for 14 for me.
Alrighty, chapter 15. Yep, and then I have some notes from like the epigraphs. So Rashek was trying to do what he thought was right. He just was wrong and didn't know what he was doing.
Yeah.
Rashek had a mentality of reward and punishment, is something that I wrote down. Because I was just sort of thinking about the whole, like, oh, the people who helped me are the nobles, and the people who were against me become the Ska, and he has a sort of, like, reward and punishment, you know, mindset, ideology. It's like, you know, this idea, like, well, what's going to work is, like, if I just punish the Ska, like, how many of you do I have to kill until you understand? You know, it's like, it's not, you know, he meters out rewards and punishment. He is the arbiter of these things. And, like, this is how the system should work. He's very, like, there's the carrot and the stick, you know, kind of guy. As, you know, he's not trying to, like, cooperate and work with people. He's just like, either you get a reward or you get a punishment. Either you're with me or you're against me. And that's just sort of some stuff I was thinking about him, with the epigraph talking about him. Vin thinks the mist isn't natural. What even is the difference between natural and supernatural is a note that I have.
She's thinking it's not natural, like, as compared to, like, previous. Like, why have you changed, like, the mist? Like, why have you changed what is different or whatever?
Right, but it's like, what... this is just, like, a concept that I think about a lot, just, like, in general. Like, natural versus supernatural. Like, what would, like... If the supernatural existed, what would make it supernatural as opposed to just more natural? Right? It's like it would just become a part of the natural. Right? Like, everything that exists in our world we consider natural, and anything beyond that would be the supernatural, which, like, some people believe in, but then it's also like, but then wouldn't that just make it natural? Wouldn't that just make it a part of the natural world then? What would make it sort of be beyond the natural world? Like, no, it's beyond that. How? We still interact with it. It's still a part of, like, our world. You know, it's like, it's still a physical thing or, like, a force that, like, we interact with. So it'd just be, like, another part of nature that we just don't understand yet. And so, like, you know, what does it mean for it to be unnatural? And like, in this case, it's like, okay, it means, like, sort of being controlled by these, like, forces, ruin or preservation or whatever. But, like, them being supernatural, what does that mean? Right, you know? Because there's a whole thing about, like, oh, you know, there's something supernatural about this, you know, what's his name? Terrace Sazed. Sazed's, like, having his whole thing where it's like, oh, it's nothing supernatural. There's a natural explanation to all this. And it's like, the natural explanation is ruin and preservation because they exist. They're a part of the world, right? And thus are a part of nature, right? Like, in my mind, that's kind of like how it works. And so it's like, you know, they exist, and you know, it's like, they exist beyond sort of what we currently know. But that doesn't make them supernatural per se. But also, I'm just like, again, like whenever I try and think too hard about, like, Supernatural, the TV show, no. Whenever I try and think too hard about, like, supernatural and what that would, like, mean, it's just like, what would make something genuinely supernatural, not just an extension of the natural world? Just a new extension of the natural world that we weren't aware of before, right? But that's just my sort of philosophical, semantic shit coming out. Missing Tensoon. She misses Tensoon.
Yeah.
She's like, wish that Tensoon were here. Ellen and Ham are talking about what to do next. Ham's too nice and friendly to be a good general. Yeah, because Ham isn't happy about the whole sending people out into the mist, and the ones that die.
Yeah.
He's just like not about that, and Vin is thinking that he's too nice, he's too friendly. Yeah. He's like he wants to get to know people and be friendly with them, and he likes people, and so then it's hard on him when they have to like die and stuff, which is a part of it.
Yeah, and she says like Kelsier was wrong about him, like him, that like he should be like a kind of like general like type or whatever. He's too invested and like
Mm-hmm. Yep, that was part of it. Human is a D&D summon. It's an action/bonus action to take direct control. Yeah, so it's like Human the Koloss. She can take direct control by using an action or a bonus action, but if because like some summons, I think it's like you use a bonus action to tell them what to do. Other ones, it's like a full action, depending. Yeah. And so it's like, to take full control, it's one of those. If not otherwise controlled, Koloss simply defends himself or uses the dodge action, Human, just does whatever he was last told to do unless given a direct control. Yeah. Sort of subconsciously, like, follows and whatnot. He's like a familiar. My familiar, Human, the Colossus. Yep.
Yeah. I like this little conversation with Human and Vin. Mm-hmm. Where it's like, he asks like why he has to stay with the others.
I have this, yeah. You can keep reading it.
Why do you have to stay with the others? Vin asked. Because you make the people in camp uncomfortable. Then they should attack me, Human said. That's why you're not a human, Vin said. We don't attack people merely because they make us uncomfortable. No, Human said. You make us kill them instead.
Yep. I had a bit of that written down in my notes, but you were starting from like a little bit earlier, which I also wanted to include, but it would have been a lot to write in the notes. But I have Human's got some bangers. Yep. When he was like, no, you make us kill them instead, I was like, holy shit. Because it's alright, it's like, we don't kill people just because they make us uncomfortable. And it's like, yeah, you do. That's very much how humans are. Yep. It's Koloss are in a sense just sort of more direct in that way. One might see it. It's I really liked that one. I made sure to write it down. Holly rested her head on your hand, not her hand. Oh. No, you don't have hands, you have paws.
Anyway, sorry.
Yep, you're not the white lion from Kingdom Death Monster. It's it's got oddly human hands, and you can steal its oddly human hands. You can loot them occasionally. It's like each of the monsters in Kingdom Death Monster has like a little like thing that goes with them, and it's like the lion like wanted to like pet itself, and so it like. But it couldn't, so it killed people and would pet them, and it formed oddly human hands because of it, essentially. Kingdom Death Monster's great. Yeah. It's just, like, weirdo, crazy shit. And I've never fully gotten through a campaign with me and my buddies. Because we're playing over, like, Tabletop Simulator. There's, like, a mod for it. But anyway, actually, not but anyway, because I need to say something, because I think that this is dumb as fuck. Like, Kingdom Death Monster is, like, one of the most expensive board games in the world. Yeah. And I get that. That's fine, right? Like, when you go to the website, it's like, this is a boutique, fucking tabletop whatever. This is a board game whatever. Each of the, like, pieces are, like, they're really, like, detailed. These, like, things that they give you, like... the pieces, and there's like a bunch of like parts that go with it, and you can like paint the minis and things like that. Like I get it. This is a well crafted physical thing that you get, but he's like, we're making a digital version, you can, like, buy this, like, digital version so that you can play it digitally.
Yeah.
But we hope that you understand that this is a boutique digital whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
There's only going to be a limited number of the digital copy or whatever. And the digital copy is also really expensive. Or, like, fairly expensive. Less expensive than the board game. But it's like, it's a fucking computer program.
Yeah.
Like, the point of the digital version, in my mind, should be, hey, we get it. You can't, like, because they're like, you know, this is like a limited market or whatever. And it's like, yeah, not everyone's going to want to play it. But not everyone can afford your expensive fucking board game.
Yeah.
But, like, the digital version, you can endlessly replicate that.
Yeah, there shouldn't be like a limited.
There shouldn't be a limited amount of the digital version of it.
That's why NFTs are like the dumbest fucking thing. Like digital scarcity, like fake scarcity with shit like that. It's like I cannot wrap my mind around it in any way, shape, or form.
Right, like so many more people would play Kingdom Death Monster, or would even just be open to playing it.
And then they would probably, like, some amount of those people would buy it eventually. Because some people won't buy something like that until they get into it. They get really into it, and then, they'll spend thousands of dollars on, you know.
Like even if you just had, like, okay, the digital version, the free, like, or cheapest digital version just has, like, the very base game set. And then any of the, like, extra shit that they also made, you can, like...
do, like, a DLC, basically.
You can do, like, a DLC
you know?
thing, basically. But, like, something so that people can, like, try the game for, like, the actual, like, gameplay portion of it, see how they like it, and then be like, actually, I do want to buy this physical thing.
Yeah, it would end up helping them, I think, you know?
Yeah, it's just, like, I just remember, like, because I knew they were making a digital one, and I don't even know if it's out yet, because it was a while ago that I was, like, looking at all this stuff. Maybe they've changed this stuff. But I just remember, like, because I was watching, there's, like, a YouTube channel where someone was, like, solo playing Kingdom Death Monster on the virtual version, like, because it's, like, an early, like, demo version or whatever, because they, like, backed the game or something, you know, one of those kind of things. And so, like, I'm like, oh, it's cool that this, like, exists, because we've been playing on, like, Tabletop Simulator, but that's kind of, like, you know, it's like a mod, and so, like, some things, like, work, but this would be, like, a bespoke thing for playing the game, and the rules would be baked in, so that could be a great way for us to play it. And then I'm on the website looking at it, and I'm like, it's not available yet, and also it's going to be, like, a limited thing, and I'm like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Why would you do it that way? Like, on Steam, they don't, you don't sell a limited number of games on Steam. You can just buy the game, because it's a fucking digital fucking file that you can just copy. Like, what is... Yeah,
that's not...
So, play Kingdom Death Monster for free by getting the mod for Tabletop Simulator if you have Tabletop Simulator, because you could just do that instead, and hopefully you can get it all working and stuff, because you have to have, like, multiple mods or whatever. It's a whole thing, you know, and it would be so much easier.
Right.
But anyway, that's not what this podcast is about. This podcast isn't about complaining.
This podcast is about tangents and only tangents.
That's true. This podcast is about tangents. It is.
Where we occasionally go on a book tangent.
Yes, occasionally the tangents are about the book that we're reading, but, you know, mostly they're just about other things.
All right, let's go back to this one.
Yes. So, right.
We were talking about Human.
Yes, we were talking about Human and his banger lines.
Yep, and then they were kind of talking about the Mist, and he mentioned that he felt like it hated him.
Yes, Human hates the Mist and it hates him, then feels it too. The Mist is her enemy, and Human is like, he's like, you know, you feel it. And so that's interesting. And I think that's it for chapter 15. That's all I have. After, I just have, like, the Mist is her enemy as the last thing.
Yeah.
So we ready for the next one?
Yeah.
Alright, chapter 16, Allomantic Savants. That's from the epigraph.
Yeah, where we get that fully explained and everything.
Right, because we were, like, seeing it in the previous, and now we have sort of, like, a name for it. Well, not the previous, technically it was, like, the one before that or something. Yeah, because this last chapter was, like, fairly short.
A lot of these chapters are a bit shorter.
Yeah. Spook's hypersensitive morning. Because he's, like, getting up, and he's, like, gotta go, like, open the door and get something from, like, just outside the door, and he's, like, you know, going through his morning routine, like, he wakes up and, you know...
Yeah, because he does stuff at night, mostly.
Right, you know, and so sort of, like, hearing everything and seeing everything and opening the door, and it's super bright, and he's gotta, like, get the water or whatever.
Yeah, with starlight as bright as the sun.
Yep.
Which, again, with like, the Mistborn world, there's the mist out as well.
Yep.
So, like...
yeah, because, like, the only people who can even see the stars are people who are, like, burning tin because of the mist. And then now the stars are bright as sunlight.
Yeah.
It makes you think of, like, when, like, the moon is full and you can, like, see surprisingly well at night. Just, like, even more so. Full moon must be, like, actually, like, pretty bright for him.
Basically, like, daylight, you know, like...
Right. And then I have Spook and Dern are pretending to be beggars. We're introduced to some guy named Dern.
Yeah, and he's got, like, wax in his ears, and...
Yep, he's got wax in his ears to keep from, like, sort of hearing too much.
And he burns it throughout the night as well.
Right, yeah.
It's not ours.
Yeah. Where is it?
He's still trying to get out of his bedroom.
Right. Yep, Dern. Yep. I know you're a quiet one, Dern said, but you have to admit that this is better than living under the lords. Yeah, so it's like him and this guy Dern are sort of pretending to be beggars.
Yeah.
Because, like, he's pretending to be a beggar and doing his blind thing, and he also talks about how, like, Dern doesn't speak like a beggar should.
Yeah.
Essentially, he, like, speaks too well. Dern is a thief lord, is something that comes up later.
Yeah.
People being burned, they, like, watch as, like, an execution is, like, happening. The citizens doing, like, an execution of people who are, like, supposedly noble or related to nobles. And he's, like, burning them, and Spook's, I think, because he's thinking about, like, it's the same as, like, with the Lord Ruler, when they would do these, like, big public executions.
Yep.
Spook and Dern talk about the state of things.
Yeah.
They're kind of, like, going back and forth about, like, you know, it's like, oh, you know... because also everything's taxed. Even their begging is taxed.
Yeah.
And that feels very, like, it's supposed to be some kind of, like, dunk on communism or some shit, you know? Because taxes. It's always about the taxes. And then, because then it's also, it's, like, talking about, like, Spook does just talk about how, like, because it's, like, they're very much about, like, the survivor and Kelsier and whatnot here in Orto.
And it's also interesting that they're all in red. That the uniform for the citizen and his people end up being red. That is interesting.
Yep. Oh yeah. I definitely noticed that as well. You know, and it's like I was
just kind of looking through here.
Red Scare kind of shit. You know, I'm like, are we in Soviet Russia? The ska burn the nobles. You know, kind of.
Yeah.
Oh, it's backwards land. You know. It's like, this is the kind of stuff Kel said, where it's like, all the shit about, like, getting rid of all the nobles and all that. It's like, Spook was like, I did see Kel talk, and this is very much the kind of thing that he was talking about, slaughtering all the nobles and, you know, putting them down and all that kind of shit. Spook is paying Dern. Dern says, count the skulls.
Yes.
Whatever that means. Citizen talks with people and encourages them after the execution. So after the execution happens, the citizen kind of, like, stays around and, like, talks to the people, walks around amongst them. It's like, oh, you know, it's tough, but, you know, it's whatever. And so it's like he's very much, like, good at, like, public relations. At, like, sort of getting the people on his side. It is sort of like, you know, this populist movement turned into, because, like, as soon as one person starts speaking for the people, for everyone, that is kind of like, you know, one person cannot speak for the wishes of the people, the masses. This isn't truly democracy, right, you know, and like the idea when it comes to, like, communism, leftist kind of stuff, is that it's supposed to be democratized. It's like, you know, if we're supposed to have democracy in our government, we should have democracy, like, in our work. The people decide, but this isn't really a real democracy. This isn't, you know, the people deciding. This is one person who claims to speak for the people deciding what the people want, and sort of using these, like, populist rallying cries to get people to do things that maybe they wouldn't otherwise want to do.
Yeah.
Which, again, it's all very interesting, but part of me is just like, you know, the whole, like, it being, like, red, and also, like, the taxes on everything feels like, why is that connected? So he's like, why are you taxing the beggars? How does that even make sense? How do you even enforce that?
Yeah.
But yeah, Spook abandons his dialect because of meeting Kelsier and realizing the power of words. He has this kind of, like, flashback thinking about, like, Kelsier and the power of words, and how Kelsier would, like, talk to people and, like, inspire people, and like, you know, it's like, Spook's like, I want to be understood, actually, and not use my Eastern Street slang. Spook thinks about what Kel might do.
Yeah.
And he whispers to Beldra, your brother, you approve of his murders? Then disappears.
Yeah.
It's like, what would Kel do? Kel would just, like...
be mysterious and then...
yeah, be mysterious and then disappear. Kel would do something, and that something would be mysterious and cool. Yep. Yep, reappears for another message. And she's like, who are you? I am the man who will kill your brother.
Yep.
A companion to God. Because, you know, he's talking about Kelsier and whatnot, and so it's like a companion to God.
A man who can see whispers and feel screams.
Mm-hmm. And then time to run.
Yeah.
Yep. Because he's like talking with the sister, being like...
Yeah. He's like, I knew the survivor. This isn't,
you know, this isn't what he would have wanted. And, you know, because it's like, she's all sad. And so he's like, it's, you know, it seems like she maybe disapproves of what her brother's doing.
Yeah. Kind of trying to, like, rescue her or something.
Yep. Trying to rescue her, get her sort of on his side in some way.
Yeah.
Yep, so it's like, yes, Spook has, like, a plot and a goal. Yep. Like, he's gonna be doing stuff with the sister. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of sort of like ATM if you think about it. Having the, like, super senses.
Yeah.
Because it's funny, because, like, that's actually kind of like a thought that I had, and then as it goes on, it just, like, directly said that, where it's like, you know, because he can see everything and sense everything, it's like, you know...
he felt a soft wind and knew a sword was swinging for him. He ducked, felt a footstep on the ground, and knew someone was attacking from the side. Just like...
Yeah, just sort of like the hyper-awareness, you know, it's like, it's not described as like time slowing down, but I sort of kind of imagine it's just sort of like perception socialing. It's like, you see the slightest movement,
because you can tell what's happening before, like, as at the start of the attack rather than, you know, as
it's like reaction, speed, and perception and whatnot.
Yeah.
Right, and then, Quellion pushes Spook's sword, so Quellion must have some noble heritage, because he can, push with metal, and he's like, so it's like he pushes, and, you know, I'm like, he could be a full-on Mistborn for all we know. You know, he could just be doing one and holding back the others.
Yeah.
You know, you can never be sure. That's the thing. If someone does one type of allomancy, they could still be a Mistborn.
Yeah.
Never forget. Never forget what's her name from book 1.
Yep. Not Alrianne. Wow.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah. We say never forget, and then we forget. The one who wanted to marry Ellen or whatever.
Yeah, they were supposed to get married.
Yep.
I can't even remember the last name, the house name.
Nope. Yeah, that one noble lady who was like, oh, she's a soother or something, or a rioter or whatever. And then it's like, nope, actually she's a full-on Mistborn. And Vin fights her when she's trying to assassinate Ellen. But I can't remember her name now. It would be in my other notebook somewhere, but I'd have to find that other notebook real quick. And then find where in the notebook I had it. Shan.
Yep.
Shan Alarial.
It's Alarial.
Yep.
As soon as you said Shan, I'm like, yep, obviously.
Yep, Shan Alarial. That's a fun name. It's like, it's so fun, and yet we forgot.
Yeah, I could only think of Alrianne, and I'm like, it's not Alrianne.
Yeah, there's
Alarial.
Alarial, Alrianne, there's got some similarity to them. Yeah. Yep, so lest we forget Shan Alarial and her hiding her Mistborn-ness.
Yeah.
But, But yeah, so Quellion can use some allomancy, which would imply anyway that he has some noble heritage, which is a big, no-no for his whole government. And yet, there's even more Mistborn.
Yep.
Or, not Mistborn, but Allomancers. More Allomancers are coming after Spook, and so it's like, oh, so it's fine for you to use Allomancers. It's like, no nobles, but you get to use Allomancers to enforce your shit.
Yep.
Which is, sort of hypocritical. It's going against this whole thing. And then Spook gets stabbed.
Yep. Yeah, he gets stabbed.
Yep.
And then he's unconscious.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Because it's like he kind of like beats everyone who's there, I think, but still gets stabbed or something. I don't remember exactly how it goes. Because like a guy stabs him through another guy.
Yeah. Yep.
And then he beats
straight
that guy.
through his friend's back, piercing his heart and driving the weapon into Spook's chest.
Yep. And then Spook passes out.
Yep.
And that's the end of chapter 16, right? And so then on to chapter 17. More epigraph notes. Rashik had the power very briefly, but quickly learned. Minutes can pass like hours to a god. In preservation mode, he didn't think to undo his mistakes, but create solutions to the problems he caused. It's missed immunization day.
Yeah.
Yep. Here we go. We've been talking about it, and now it's finally happening. Missed immunization day. Everyone get your missed shots and hope you don't die. Elend broods in private to be confident in public.
Yep.
1 in 50 die, so it says.
Yeah.
They were given the option to go back to Luthadel. If some die, then that's his will. Meaning Kelsier's, I believe. And it's like, well, if they die, that's his will. And it's like the ways in which, like, it's interesting. Like, the use of religion and the sort of, like, Kelsier becoming this religious figure. Where it's like, it's a little bit easier to deal with if we can kind of blame it on Kelsier, who's already dead.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
If it's like, if if we can, Kelsier sort of like takes the blame, but he's already dead, and also we've made him a religious figure where it's like, oh, well, it's his will.
Yeah.
And it's, God's will be done. God works in mysterious ways.
Yeah.
We'll just like make it both his fault, but also it's all, part of the plan.
Yeah.
It's all,
yeah.
We can't see it.
It
all turns out well somehow, like putting this sort of like positive spin on. It's like, we know that Kelsier wasn't literally a god.
Yeah.
But it's like the sort of usefulness of religion.
Yeah.
It is interesting. It's like, this religion, like, is it true? But is it useful?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are, like, true aspects of it. Like, it came about in this,
Right, there's true aspects of it, but it's like taking these true things and then, like, mythologizing them and making them bigger, Right, because we're talking with Demu.
Yeah.
Ellen believes because he'd rather that than nothing, which is a sort of a common thing that I hear. Certain people will be like, why be atheist? Why believe in nothing? Why not just believe in something? And it's like, well, it's not about, like, if you choose to believe something, is that really, like, believing? Maybe. But it's like, it's not a matter of, like, choosing to believe. It's a matter of, like, being convinced by the evidence.
Yeah.
One way or the other. And he's just like, well, it's better to just choose to believe than to not believe. And it's like, that feels a little weak to me, but okay. Demu believes Kelsier was a man, but became something else. Why did he snap in the pits, but not before? Something divine happened in the pits. Which is very interesting, because it's like, you snap when you undergo these sort of, like, traumatic things. Like, he was a ska growing up in the underground, which, I mean, actually, like, he grew up pretty okay.
Yeah.
But it's like, how did he never experience anything to make him snap until the pits? And it's like, well, actually, Kelsier kind of had a fairly nice life up until then.
But he didn't talk much about, like, his life before. Like,
that's true.
Some of, like, the older crew members know, but, like, someone like Demu wouldn't have.
Yeah, it's like, Demu wouldn't have really, like, known about that, but it's like, we kind of know that, like, because, like, he does talk about, like, him and his brother being like...
They lived, like, with the noble side for a bit.
Yeah.
Basically.
Right, and so it's like...
Because, like, I think their mom was, like, pretending to be a noble or something, like...
Yeah. Which then I guess makes you wonder, were they, like, subjected to, like... The like, searching for allomancers that happens in the nobility. Have we already...
I don't think we...
Like, because that wasn't in the last section, was it?
No. Is it in this section?
Maybe.
Unless maybe we did talk about it in the last.
My God, I have so many notes for chapter 21. I think we did go over it in the previous thing, because you're, like, talking about, like, you know, you were mentioning, like, you were talking about it before, you know. But... Yeah, maybe.
I didn't know if you just talked about it, though.
Like,
or
if we just, like,
podcast.
Yeah, if we just, like, talked about it, like, off the podcast or not. Yeah, I feel like we did. Like, we maybe talked about it.
Because I don't remember how it came up in this bit.
Yeah, I don't really remember how exactly it came up in the books, the whole, like, searching for allomancers and stuff. Yeah, because this is the whole thing, but like, you can, you know, just submit yourself to a controlled test.
Yeah. A controlled, almost dying...
Mm-hmm.
It might be in this section up here.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it might be in chapter 21.
It might be in chapter 21?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, anyway, we were talking about, like, you know, why didn't he snap anytime before? It's like, would he have had the opportunity to have snapped before then? And thinking about it, it's like, maybe not, depending on, like, if he was living in noble society or not, and, like, whether or not he was, you know, because he wasn't living in the underground the same way as everyone else, but he was also, like, depending on when he was in noble society and whatnot, maybe. But the point is that Demu thinks that, like, the reason why he snapped in the pits is because something sort of divine happened while he was in the pits, you know, because Demu knows a little bit about this whole, like, ruin and preservation stuff from talking to, like, the crew, I think, but yeah, and then Demu is shaking.
Yep.
Demu is shaking, oh no. Is my last note. It is in 21? Gotcha. Yeah, so Demu starts shaking because of the mist.
Yep.
He ends up being one of the people who's being, like, affected by it. Whether or not he will end up dying, we will see in the future chapter.
Yep.
But Ellen's like, oh fuck, I didn't think it'd be Demu. And it's like, yeah, bruh, that's what happens. It was always a possibility. But yeah, and that's it for chapter 17 as far as I've got. You got anything else?
Nope.
Chapter 18. Sazed is thinking about his convo with Vin and about religions. Feels like a hypocrite, needs answers. Just, you know, typical Sazed stuff now. Gordell couldn't stand growing food he knew wasn't for him. Because he was, like, one of the guards, right? Yeah. That, like, ended up, he's like, he helped, Ellen, like, Vin showed up and, like, they had that moment, and then he helped, like, Ellen get into the palace, try and save Vin, and he was like, Vin ended up, you know, helping us and all that jazz. And he's, like, you know, talking about, like, the ska, working the fields and stuff. Sazed's like, has anything really, like, changed, you know? It's like the ska are still out here, like, working the fields and whatnot. He's like, yeah, but now they're working, you know, for themselves and for their loved ones rather than because they're being forced to.
Yeah.
And he was like, you know, the reason why I sort of, like, joined the guard and stuff, you know, wasn't... It's like, oh, it seems kind of, like, traitorous, but it's like, I couldn't stand growing food that he knew wasn't for him. Growing food for someone else. Yeah. You know, for the nobility. Yeah. And, like, all of his, like, he'd have to work so hard to grow food that he wouldn't even get to, like, have. Yes. Sazed sees all the ska working and feels like nothing has changed, but now they grow food for themselves. And everybody, not because they're being forced to grow it for the aristocracy. Yeah. Says that goes to the pits of Hathin. Yeah. Where the terrace are now. Yep. Yep. It's like he's gonna go, because, like, he's traveling with some people.
Yeah, Breeze and Alrianne, it seems.
Yeah, they're like traveling back to Luthadel or something. Yeah. And he's like gonna stop off by the Pits of Hathsin because that's where the terrorist people are hanging out now. The terrorists here are actually doing kind of better than most of the people around right now. And he's like, how strange that the terrorist people would be like doing better off than everyone else right now. How things have changed.
Yeah.
And
kind of turning the Pits of Hathsin into this like
into this place that actually like can support people.
Yeah.
They call him Lord Sazed.
Yes.
Some folks come out, they're like, Lord Sazed, and he's like, oh, man.
Do not call me that.
Do not call me that, please.
Please, Master Keeper.
Yep.
They call me Lord Sazed, Your Majesty, and then Master Keeper.
Yep. Yeah, and,
Yeah, there's not a ton in this,
Right, yeah. I'm looking through my notes, and now I'm seeing where in 21 the stuff comes up. Yeah, because do we cut back to the terrace in Pits of Hathsin in like later chapters in this section, or is this the only section that has it?
I've not looked through really, so.
Right. Yeah, right, because
we do get back with Sazed for a little bit. Chapter 22, we go back to Sazed for a very short amount of time.
Gotcha. Chapter 22, you said we go back for a little bit?
Yep.
Right. Gotcha. I think I can still like talk about this because I think this does come up in this section where it's like the interesting thing about the pits and moving people into the pits is that because there was this whole big like mining operation at the pits are actually equipped to like house a bunch of people.
Yeah.
It's like there's like existing structures at the pits
for
like housing people and for like administration and stuff. So it's actually like surprisingly like well set up in a good spot for them to set people up. It's like, you can, they have buildings and things out there. And so it's just like, well, it's just kind of abandoned. It's not being used for anything. It's not being used as a mine anymore.
Nope.
Because Kelsier came by and destroyed everything. So like, just take up residence here. And that's, I think that's about it for chapter 18. In chapter 19.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the ash is, like, super black and supernatural, like the mist, perhaps. Oh, yeah, Spook got knocked out.
Yep.
It's my note. It's like, he's like, what's going on? Oh, right, Spook got knocked out. Oh, fuck. Yeah, he's finally out of tin, so everything seems dull and vague.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm so used to using tin that now I'm like, I can't even, It's everything seems dull by comparison without it.
Yeah.
He's in a room. He's dying. And the house is burning.
Yep. Who's
talking to him? Kelsier? Dern? Marsh? Those were my guesses at the time.
Got
you. Spook's burning a new metal? How? I've given you the blessing of pewter. Kelsier? Why? How? There's ways if I think about it. Kandra, maybe? Where are Kelsier's bones? Gift language used by Kandra, so maybe? Preservation magic shit like Demu was saying Kandra are of preservation. So that was me kind of like trying to work through. It's like, because it's like Demu's going through the burning house and he's hearing this voice like guiding him and like guides him to like a desk where he gets like metal and he like consumes it. It's like, oh, it's not tin, and he's like, it's like, oh, I can burn it, and it's pewter, and it's like, I'm giving you the gift of pewter, and it's Kelsier's there. It's like, how? Why? You're dead. You're so dead. Like, you're so super definitely dead. How are you here? Why are you here? Where are Kelsier's bones? Who has Kelsier's bones? Like, or Sir had Kelsier's bones, but then or Sir, like, stopped using Kelsier's bones, right?
Yeah.
Like, he went and impersonated Kelsier, but then, whenever he was with, Vin, at the beginning...
He was Tensoon.
At the very beginning, it was Orsur, and it was just some guy.
Yeah.
It was just some guy's bones, right? And so it's like, where'd Kelsier's bones go? Is this a Kandra? Kandra's like... It's like, oh, I gave you the gift of pewter. And it's like, oh, like, it's like, oh, I gave you the gift of awareness or whatever. Like, the Kandra use stuff like that. So it's like, what are these gifts? How can you just gift someone pewter? Like, there's the metal that makes you a Mistborn, but, like, what... how is he gifted pewter? Like, this is some shit that we just haven't, like, come across yet, right? So it's like... But we know that, like, Marsh wasn't a Mistborn, but then through hemalurgy shit, became a Mistborn.
Yeah.
So maybe this is some hemalurgy shit? But someone has to die in order for that? Someone always has to die in order for hemalurgy? But also, you know, preservation magic shit, like Demu was saying.
Yeah.
Like, maybe there is some sort of, like, Kelsier got magicked by preservation, Kandra are of preservation. So, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, like, just word association.
Yeah.
You know, preservation, Kandra, his bones. Where are his bones? Where's Kelsier's bones? Where'd they go? These damn saints' bones. Like it's the fucking Catholic Church or some shit. You know? These damn saints' bones. And, you know, we have them in a reliquary somewhere. Where's Kelsier's bones? Why was nobody keeping track of Kelsier's bones? You know? It's always like, oh, we found these bones from this saint. And it's like, you know, you only become a saint after the fact.
Yeah.
So it's like, no, we weren't you know, it's like, Mozart's only Mozart after the fact. His body's gone. It's lost. We don't have it anymore. He was just, like, we don't know where Mozart's body is anymore because he was only Mozart now.
Yeah.
At the time, he was big, but you're only as big as, like, a pop star or something. It's, like, only through the course of history that you become the Mozart, you know? Like, Taylor Swift is, like, huge right now, but will she be, like, remembered in the same kind of a way? Who will? You know, it's like... You know, who lives on in history and whose bones get to be important. And, you know, important enough that we're like, we're going to save them and preserve them. And, you know, do we only think to do that after the fact, after they're already gone? But like Kelsier, we had his bones for Kandra reasons. But then, Orsur wasn't him later when he was with Vin. He was actually Orsur at the beginning of the book. At the very beginning, he was Orsur. He gets replaced by Tensoon later. Whenever she's like, be this dog. That's when that happens, right? So it's like, we get like a very brief bit of actual Orsur, and he's not Kelsier at that time. So where'd the bones go? Anyway. That's all. It's just Kelsier showed up, and I'm like, how? How? How is this Kelsier? He's so dead. But yeah, that's chapter 19.
I think that's basically... I think your notes for that is perfect. It's just what the fuck? What the fuck? What? Okay, sure.
What the fuck? What's happening? What's going on? Why is it this?
That's basically what that chapter is.
Yep. So you know, curious. Lots of questions.
Exactly.
Alright. Chapter 20. Oh boy. Tensoon. Yeah, my first things are like epigraph, hatred, mists, you know, all that jazz. The gods of the Kandra people were at war again, but the only people aware are acting like nothing's happening. Very interesting. Ruin and preservation are, quote, the gods of the Kandra. Of the Kandra people. And that's interesting. Like, they know, like, the Kandra somehow know about ruin and preservation in a way that, like, the rest of the world doesn't.
No.
And that's, like, wild. Because it's like, the Kandra weren't, like, were the Kandra, like, they weren't created by the Lord Ruler, were they? They were?
Yeah, well, they call him Father, and it seems like that's the case. We don't know how, but...
Right. So it's like, how do they know? But they came to him to make the contract? It's like he created them, but then they were just like existed, and then...
Yeah, it seems like they were around for like a couple hundred years before they made the contract.
I wonder if just like as part of his whole like making the world the way it is now, he just like also made the Kandra? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, yeah, because if like he made the Kandra from the magic of preservation when he was creating like the microbes and the plants and all that kind of shit. It's like, and also Kandra, and also Kolos, sure. Like, I don't know, but ruin and preservation are the gods of the Kandra, and they like know about them somehow. So I'm like, how do y'all know? But no one else does.
Yeah.
What was he telling y'all that he wasn't telling anyone else? Yeah. Given a blessing, Kandra lose a lot of their instincts and have to relearn how to form around bones and such. Again, it's like when they're wild mistwraiths, they just like take things in and make them part of their body. But then whenever they get like their blessings that make them a Kandra, they like have to relearn.
Yeah, they have to like kind of consciously do it instead of instinctually.
Yeah, so it's like they're sort of like raised up from animals.
Yeah.
And they lose their like animal instinct essentially.
Yeah,
And they have
or
to,
at least a lot of it.
They have to relearn, like they become children again essentially. Yeah. But like Kandra as opposed to Mistwraith, it's weird. Mm-hmm. Like how, what the fuck is this? Like, were Mistwraiths, did Mistwraiths just exist before? They've just always existed, but the Kandra, as like having been elevated from Mistwraiths by giving them gifts, that comes from the Lord Ruler, you know?
Yeah.
Like maybe they just existed previously. They just always existed. They were just always a part of the world, but he turned them into Kandra. That's one possibility that's jumping around my brain. Yeah, soup of algae and fungus.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like they like feed them like algae and fungus. 6th and 7th gen are bulk of contract fillers. Milan?
Oh, Milan.
Yeah, Milan. And her overly large eyes. She's an anime girl. That's what I have. Like, she's a real life anime girl. Yep. She's got overly large eyes.
She's got spindly wind bones.
Yep. She's
yeah.
Yep. We are of preservation. No revolutions here. We can't have a revolution. We're all about preservation. But Milan's a revolutionary. Blessing of awareness. Orser has blessing of awareness or something, I think. Or maybe the others around him do. He's like talking about like he's trying to talk with Milan and he's like I can't say certain things because I know that they have like people around watching with the blessing of awareness.
Yeah.
Or Sir, blessing of potency. They didn't find it on him. And I'm like, what does that mean? What do you mean they didn't find it on you? How is the blessing is a thing that's like on you? Quote, breaking, I have, but I don't know what that means.
Where?
I don't know, I just have, quote, breaking.
Like I broke contract?
No. My next note after is...
Oh, just he did not break me?
Yeah. Yeah, but like, yeah, because like the way that they use...
The
like,
Zane. The man Zane, he did not break me.
Yes.
And then, you returned as a dog, like, for what, like...
Yeah. And so, like, they're talking about, like, breaking in that way. And I'm like, I was wondering if that was maybe, like, a...
Yeah, no. It's not, like, a capitalized...
Right, like, if it was, like, oh, that's the term that they use for when they do the whole, like, taking control of them, you know?
Got you. Yeah.
Breaking them or something.
Yeah. But no, they're just talking about, like, emotionally.
Yeah. Yep. She's got inhuman bones, yet finds his dog bones disturbing.
Yeah.
Just sort of one of those interesting, like, you're a bit out there, but you're not that out there yet, you know. Does want to escape. He does want to escape, but he's, because Tensoon's kind of he's very, like, sort of in, like, a weird sort of conflicted spot. He's, like, he wants to just sort of, like, follow the rules, do what's right.
He just wants to, like, be the best Kandra and, like, and follow, like, the contract and all of that. And he broke it, but, like, he still feels like,
It's like, no, I did it for, like, the right reason.
Right, and so then, like, I have to take the punishment, but, like, so it's still kind of, like, in that, but it's also, like, but this is actually bigger, and, like, maybe I don't need to be...
Yep. Yeah, because, like, I do actually want to escape, and I kind of want this, like, stuff that she's talking about, but it's, like...
And for Kandra, like, society to change is, like, kind of part of it.
Yep, and so he's kind of, like, sort of torn. He's kind of struggling right now. You know, he's very sort of like, he's too caught up in the system, and Chandra are very about that sort of system.
Yeah.
They live in this very sort of rigid, structured society.
Yeah.
Tensoon hated humans and was the most orthodox. He was super orthodox and shit. Yep. He was...
It's part of why everyone is, like...
So, like, confused and sort of thrown off by... And it's also sort of part of the idea of, like, you know... It almost sort of says something that someone who is, like, so orthodox and so whatever feels this way about Vin. Yep. You know? And, like, it's like, no, she is mother now. And it's like, whoa, you've really gone 180. But it's like, if even the most orthodox or whatever is now saying this, what does that maybe, like, say about the state of things? And and that's chapter 20. Yep. And so, 21...
Sorry, I did want to say one more thing about the last chapter.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
It was just the whole him talking about wanting to escape, and he's kind of, like, purposefully saying, like, he doesn't want his old bones back, they're disrespectful, blah, 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 just doing this whole, like...
Right, he's...
Because he knows people are listening.
Right, it's like, please don't throw me in that briar patch.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that. Like, a reference to that story in a very long time.
Oh, yeah, that's...
I don't know how that, like, just came back to me.
We had, like, a book of, like, some of those, like, illustrated with, like, the tar baby and that kind of stuff. Yeah,
I had that as well. I think the book that you're talking about.
Yeah, like the Brer Rabbit stories and all that jazz. Yeah, very, very interesting history to those kinds of stories. Yeah, because I think, like, a lot of those stories come from, like, old, like, African, like, fables and stuff. Yeah, sort of, like, brought over and then, like, brought to America through, like, slavery and all that. Yeah. Which is why, like, the tar baby looks like that.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I could be so wrong about this. This is like me trying to
from memory,
and I'm like, and I could be getting some, you know, cultural thing very wrong right now. So I want to try and, but anyway, so that's the end of that. Yeah, he's reverse psychologying them. Yes.
That was the only thing I wanted to mention from the last one.
Gotcha. And all right, so now we're done with chapter 20. 21, the big chapter.
Yeah. It's like basically the same size as like the next 3 chapters put together.
Right, and I've got so many notes. So I'm going to try and get through this relatively quickly and then try and sort of like put it all together. So yeah, my first notes are like epigraphs that we've already been over. Used to be any elemental could control the Colossus and stuff. Demu survived. Yay! Yeah. Hooray! Full beard, long hair. I think that's Elend. Elend has a full beard and long hair now. Yeah. Vin's reading the logbook again. She's always reading that logbook. She's fixated on a paragraph about how the deepness is sentient and hated Alendi. And is trying to like figure out like what's the deal with the deepness and the mist and the sentience and the hating and the swirling and the pulling away. All the shit that I was talking about earlier where it's like, what is it? Is it preservation? Is it ruin? Is it neither? What is it? Because also it's like, oh, there was like the black fog. Yeah. Or the smoke that they didn't know what to do with.
Yeah, that when they first saw the well.
Right, and in one of the epigraphs, she's like, oh, it's like part of a god? Yeah. And how are we supposed to know that? Yeah. And so, like, is it like a counterpart to the mist? You know? This, black fog? I don't know. Right. All messages now memorized or etched in metal, which is good, because those are the only ways that can be... that are, like, safe. So it's like, all messages are no longer written down. It's just like, you tell it to someone and they memorize it and then pass it on. Or you etch it into metal, if you have to. Ruin can change text, so can we trust the logbook? Right. Is something that I have. She used to be able to talk to Sazed, Elend, and Tensoon, but they're all differently unavailable right now. She's like... I used to talk about these things with, like, Sazed, but Sazed's not feeling it. Tensoon's gone. Ellen's having to run everything. It's just like, Ellen's become distant in some ways, and so is Sazed. Well, it's not so much distant so much as he is just, like, brooding and dealing with all the stress of being an emperor. He just has a
lot on his plate.
He's got a lot on his plate. There's always another secret. She's thinking about how Kelsier would say, there's always another secret.
Yep.
Take a large task, break it into pieces, make it all seem more manageable, like how Kelsier used to do. What do we know for certain? There was a power at the well. There was something living there. It tricked Vin into breaking its bonds. Maybe the power could have destroyed Ruin instead. The power was also understanding. Gaining the power also gave you understanding. Ruin can change the world while contained. Don't know for certain Ruin is behind the mist killings and Ashfall. That's an important one. It's like, we think that they're connected, but we actually don't know for sure that any of that's actually connected. Like the extra Ashfall and stuff.
Yeah, the extra ash and the mist killings.
Like one would imagine, considering that started happening after Ruin was released, but we don't actually know for certain. So it's like a little asterisk by that one. Ruin seems to follow rules of some sort. First rule of Allomancy is consequence. Ruin's actions feel like consequences. Ellen is thinking about the science of Allomancy, a thing of nature, a consequence. It wasn't a creature, but a force, and forces have rules. Mm-hmm. Vin and Ellen hug. Is my next note, which is just kind of funny after all that. Yeah. But it's nice. It's nice that they get to hug. Ellen feels like he's becoming like the Lord Ruler. He feels ruthless and brutal. To me, he feels like Alendi, because that's also something that's talking about with like Alendi and what Alendi had to do.
And I think he still kind of associates like Alendi and
the Lord
with
Ruler
the logbook, even though they were not the same person.
Yep, very much so. And then we get to systematic beating of children to try and see if people snapped. Because that's why he brings it up, because he's like, I stopped that, but then also it's like we're no longer looking for Allomancers, which are like really useful. Yeah. So it's like,
so am I actually doing something wrong there?
Yeah, so am I actually doing something wrong by not doing this? It's like sort of like trying to, we've been forced into the situation wherein we're sort of tempted by circumstance to get this sort of like brutal consequentialist approach.
Yeah.
Maybe we should just be, testing everyone to see if they'll snap. So systematic beating of children to try and see if people snapped, which is something that I talked about all that time ago. I was like, if only the nobility are supposed to have allomancy and they have these like mistborn allomancers running around doing stuff, how do they find them?
Yep.
If they need to be snapped. And so like way a while back.
Yeah, because I was thinking about literally like this when you were talking about it, like this absolutely like comes up.
Mm-hmm. It really does. And I was like, I got it. I was, I'm on the same page. You can, when you come of age, you can undergo a controlled beating to see if you snap, if you so choose, which is so interesting. You can be like a state supervised, see if we can make you snap. This is all one big moral thought experiment about consequentialism. The balance of who we wish to be and who we need to be, Ellen says, and it's very interesting. It's like, what are we trying to achieve? What's our ideal, and what is sort of our realistic approach to that ideal? Like, what aspects of the ideal are unrealistic, and what do we need to do instead? Yeah. But, like, what sort of ideal are we striving to? Who do we want to be, and who do we need to be? Norden, the happy obligator. I have a note here. Vin thinks he's good.
Yeah, Vin smiled as well. Once she had thought that a happy obligator was always a bad sign. That was before she'd known Norden.
Yep, I immediately don't trust him, lol. like they're just like in this little bit, because like he showed up in the last book. Yeah. And it's just kind of mentioned, but doesn't do anything, but is named and just kind of exists. And now he's here again. And it's like, oh, Norden, he's great. I love him. Nothing wrong with him. And I'm like, suspicious. Vin's too not suspicious of him. She's suspicious of everyone. But we haven't seen her grow unsuspicious of him in the way that we do with like other people. She's just like, oh, Norden. Yeah. He's fine. And I'm like, Is he? I guess. You know. Fewer dead than expected. 5,243 dead. Approximately 13.5% of the army. Precisely 16% of the soldiers fell sick. It always affects precisely 16% of the population that enters it. The deaths aren't a precise percentage like the number that fall ill. Why 16%? Yep, because she does a whole thing where it's like, she goes through and it's like, you know, because they're giving like numbers and whatnot. It's like, no, like, we, like, trying to find like some specifics. Like, did you count this? Did you not count this? Did you, you know? And then once they like sort of figure out the right parameters, it's like, no. Of a number of people that go into the mist, 16% of them always... Exactly to the man. Yes. Yeah. Not like sometimes more, sometimes less, but averaging out to 16. Every single time, it's 16% or as close to 16% as you can get if the number is not a number where you can evenly divide something that way, you know? Yeah. Then it's like a little bit off, but it's as close to 16% every single time as you can are affected, not necessarily die, but get like Demu, like, because like Demu got shaken by it but then didn't die. Yeah. But 16% always get affected. It's more of a regular sort of percent that die, where it's like sometimes more, sometimes less, averaging out to some amount, you know, die, but the amount that get affected at all is always exactly 16%. Yeah. And it's like, why? Why 16%? What's going on here? And that's chapter 21. Yep, it's very, very interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's like we're starting to get a little bit of trying to explain and understand what's going on here with like ruin and preservation. It's like, it doesn't matter how old the average number of the population is, nor does it matter where they live. Each one shows identical percentage of people falling sick. Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting because it's like this whole talk about like consequence. It's like ruin is somehow like doing something with the numbers, you know? It's like, if you go into the mist, exactly this percent happens, and it follows rules, and it's a power. You know, it's like, it's not like a creature. It's a power, and it's a power that affects exactly 16% of a given population that goes into the mist. Yeah. Because it follows some sort of rule, and the rule being it's always 16%, but it's like, why? Why is that? Why does it work that way? Yeah, we need to still figure it out. This is just like one data point. Yep, it's just a little bit of the fuck. Yeah, but it's like, oh, there is a pattern, but why is this the pattern? And we need to sort of like work on more of it. But yeah, so this chapter, you know, it's all one big moral thought experiment about consequentialism. Creating a scenario wherein it really seems like the best thing to do is an awful thing. Yeah. You know, that something that in a sort of deontological sense is bad, but consequentially is maybe good because we've built this exact scenario to make it that way, as in this book, you know? And so it's like, you know, a thought experiment about consequentialism, and we'll see how it all sort of turns out, because it's like, you know, we're being brutal with this whole having the army go out and die, but it's like we can't really like avoid that. We can avoid the whole snapping thing, and also like he calls himself very brutal in all of this, and like it does kind of seem that way, but also he gave them a choice. Like if they didn't want to take this chance and go out in the mist, they could go back. To. You know, that's true. I'd forgotten about that. So like he feels horrible about it and feels responsible for all these like deaths and stuff like that. But he did give them a choice, and he informed them all before they went in. They all knew what they were going in for. Right. You know, the important thing is that it is an informed consent model. It's like they were given all the information and they could choose whether they want to or not, and they all chose to do it because it really is the only thing that you can do. You're gonna have to go into the mist at some point. Especially since it's been coming earlier and earlier. Like, it's been coming earlier and earlier. Like, you know, if someone attacks us while the mist is out, you'd have to
just have to chance it while we're fighting, and then all of us die, or a ton of us die because the whole place is in chaos because half of the people are falling sick and dying.
Right, especially
or 16%.
16 are falling sick, and some percentage of those are then dying. And if they're in some sort of like critical position when that happens, like we're forming a line, and then 16% of that line fails, then that affects the whole line. But if like those people are already gone and we're forming a line of people who aren't going to be affected by it, that's a different story.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yep. It's all very interesting, and I'm so curious where it all ends up, where all this stuff about, ruin and power and consequence and following rules and all that. Where does it all lead to? Yeah. Where does it all end up at? Why 16?
Yeah.
Why 16%?
I did want to mention a little bit in like this section, like in chapter 21, like Vin kind of just like, because she's kind of thinking this all like through her head and stuff.
16 to the power of 2. Maybe that's important. 32%, 64%, 128%. 128% of the population gets sick. Some of them get double sick.
Sorry, I'm just looking through this. I just remembered there being like an interesting line that she like thinks kind of like in her head.
Like what about?
Where'd it go?
Like what's she thinking about at the time?
It's just like kind of her like kind of old paranoia, type of thing. Just like talking to Ellen. It's nothing, Ellen. Nothing I can speak of, at least. He watched her for a moment. He thinks that you're plotting against him, Reen whispered from the back of her mind. Fortunately, the days when she had listened to Reen's words were long past.
Yeah.
Just like...
Yeah. When you started sort of explaining that, I was wondering if that's the line that you were talking about. Yeah. It is interesting, because, like, for a while I was, like, really wondering if the whole Reen talking to her thing was going to be, like, mystical. But then, and, like, I'm still, because Zane and God... Kill him, God said, but then when Reen's dying, not Reen, when Zane's dying, it's all like
you
weren't insane after all, and it's like, what was up with that? Like, are we gonna get an explanation for that in this? Was that, ruin or preservation or whatever? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So so the Reen voice in the head maybe is just like, it's just her like instinct, and she, but. Yeah. It could still be something fucky.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for it to be something fucky.
Yeah.
Alright. Was that it for chapter...
that's all I had for 21.
For 21? Alrighty. Chapter 22. Original 9 Elementers. Sazed and the Terrace Elders. I have Pits of Hathsin Gehenna. Because there's, like, Gehenna, which is, like, there's that valley that was, like, a trash heap or whatever, and like, a lot of the references to hell are references to Gehenna, and it's, like, they will be thrown out.
Yeah.
They'll be, thrown to Gehenna, and they'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth, and the worm will never die, and all this. Like, a lot of the references to hell are references to Gehenna, which was an actual, like, place.
Yeah.
That was, like, a place where people dumped trash and refuse and stuff. And so the whole, like, Pits of Hathsin, that's kind of like hell.
Yeah.
Gehenna is sort of like a similar kind of thing. It's just, like, a little parallel thing that I was reminded of. I think I'm getting that right about Gehenna. Even when the Lord Ruler was alive, he was not their leader. Talking about the Terrace people.
Yeah.
It's like... Because they want Sazed to be a leader, and Sazed's like, we were... it's like, actually being led by a Terraceman. It's like, we were led by a Terraceman for, like 1,000 years.
Was that any better for us?
Was that any better? And it's like, the Lord Ruler wasn't really their leader. The Synod was.
Yeah.
It's like, everyone was under the subjugation of the Lord Ruler.
Yeah.
But the Lord Ruler was not really their leader.
Yeah.
It's like, a dictator like that isn't so much a leader in the way in which they want Sazed to be a leader.
Right.
They want Sazed to be a leader, but he feels unworthy and such.
Yeah. And he also does not wear his copper mines right now.
Yes. They're like, you're not wearing your copper mines. Terrace seem not to be killed by the day mist, which is strange. Why? What is it about the terrace versus the ska?
Yeah.
Or the nobles? Why? What? Because they have, like, ferrochem and stuff, some of them, so it's like, what's up, like, what, why, I want answers.
Yeah.
He wants to run and hide from the world's problems, mood, Sazed.
Yeah.
Big mood. I feel you. Kelsier has a gap in history after the pits where he was in the West. I think that's actually, that's for the next chapter's Epigraphs, but I have it in this section of my notes for some reason. So yeah, very short chapter.
It's just kind of checking in with Sazed, and he's like...
talking with the elders, and they want him to be a leader, and he's like, no!
Yeah.
But it's also like, well, you gotta do something, you know.
So he's gonna continue on his research for Vin and Elend. Yep.
Gotta keep on keeping on.
Yep.
And that's it for chapter 22. Chapter 23. Before the collapse, Skychild in the dust. Right, because this is
Spook's backstory.
Spook's memory and his backstory. Flashback of Clubs getting Spook from his parents.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because it's like, the whole thing is like, they're arguing about it because it's like, oh, he's a missting. Yeah. And it's like, oh, and they make a reference to the whole, like, you shouldn't have let him run around with those thugs or whatever. You can't understand him. He's got the Eastern street slang. And then Clubs is there and he's like, I'll buy him. And, you know, it's like, because Clubs is actually his, like, uncle, right? Yeah. And they're like, go off with your Uncle Clubs and you just, like, have this money or whatever. And it's like...
Yeah, because they wanted to, like, turn him in at first or whatever, and they're like, no, but we'll be executed, and this whole, like...
It's like, because the relation, and, like, no one's supposed to be... It's like, if we're related to him, that means we're also all related to this, like, nobility stuff, and that's not supposed to be a big whole thing. And it's like, I'll take him off your hands, like, how do we know that you won't betray us or whatever? It's like, why? It's like, what do you mean? It's like, it would be just as bad for me.
Yeah.
To try and do that and just take the money and shut up. And so then he does end up going off.
Oh, yeah, they tried to kill him first.
Yeah.
They tried to, like, his dad. I was just, like, kind of reading this. They tried to, like, strangle him first, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can't just let him run about. They'll discover what he is. There's only one thing to be done, the large man said, pressing down on Spook's neck even harder. And, like, father, you're not my son. Basically all of that, while they're, like, choking him to death. And then...
Right, and then Club shows up and then they have that whole scene, that whole interaction, right? Yeah, because, like, I think at the time I was very much just, like, listening, and I wasn't taking as detailed notes because I was just, like, in the scene. Yeah. Named himself Lestabornes, Lefting I'm born, I've been abandoned.
Yeah.
And so we get where Lestabornes comes from. So it's like we don't even get, like, a sort of original proper name for him.
No.
And also...
I don't think he really had one.
Yeah. Yeah, because, like, he wasn't...
Oh, no, I guess he did. Spook opened his mouth and stopped. His old name didn't seem like it would do anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so he had one, but we don't even, like, know what it is.
No, we just get Boy.
Yeah, we just get Boy, and then Lestabornes, which, and then he's called Spook by Kelsier, and he kind of likes that name better because it's, you know...
Yeah. Yeah, that's also very sad, so first, like, Clubs kind of blackmails them and is like, I'll bring down obligators if you don't...
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it's like, if you don't give it to me, I'll fucking turn you in.
And then, like, his mom, like, she can just, like, basically give him a look, and that's it.
Yep. Spook has had it rough.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's like, you know, at first I was like... It's like, his name's Lestabornes, and y'all just call him Spook all the time. It's like, you can learn to say his name, but it's like, well, he actually doesn't like that name as much because it is a name that he gave himself, but it's a very sad name that he gave himself. And then, so he likes Spook better because, like, Kelsier gave him that name, and it's like a name sort of like...
A given
name that's, like, not associated with all that sort of stuff and more associated with, like, Kelsier and friendship and being part of the crew and, you know, all that jazz. So it's like, you know... sort of has more meaning to him in that sense. Lesta born as lefting I'm born, I've been abandoned, which is like interesting.
Yeah.
Again, trying to decipher this like Eastern street slang and how it's all supposed to like work and stuff.
Yeah.
Everything's like ing. It's like there's like wasing the whatever, lefting the whatever, wasn't the something, it's like lefting I'm born and then I've been abandoned. It's like
basically leaving, been born leaving almost.
Yeah, because it's like
as it being abandoned.
Yes, lefting I'm born, like being left.
Yeah.
Like being left, but instead of being left, it's lefting.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, instead of having the auxiliary verb where it's like being left born, it's like lefting I'm born. And so it's also like, I'm being left.
Right.
But it's like born is kind of like weird in there. Like I'd almost expect it to be like, because it's born as in like to be born.
Right.
To be like, as in like birth, born. As opposed to like with an E as in like born from here to there.
Right.
Because if it was like, oh, like born out of like taken.
Yeah.
It's like being born in the sense of like moving from one place to another, and also a sense of like being left. Abandoned, like moving into being left.
Right.
Almost like being born into being left behind.
Yeah.
Because like the game Bloodborne, it's born with an E at the end, like a blood-borne virus, like it's transmitted via blood, like airborne, going through the air, bloodborne, going through the blood, and so it's like going through being left?
Yeah, basically, I guess.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the most...
sort of way to understand it. Yeah, because, like, I'd love to sit down with Brandon Sanderson and being like, Eastern street slang, do you just, like, make up some shit? Or do you have, like, a structured, like...
Let me check, like, Coppermind and see if, like, there's been a word of Brandon about Eastern street slang.
Yeah, it's like, do you like, okay, I have a sentence, I need to translate it into Eastern street slang, and so I have, like, a rigorous process by which I go through that, Because I think about sort of, like, Cockney rhyming slang, where, like, words get replaced by other words and phrases based on rhyming, and it's like it's a whole thing, and so it's like, is there some level of that also being involved, where words are being replaced with other words, and it makes sense in Eastern street slang, but not to us, because we've taken a word and replaced it with another word, and we know that it actually means this other thing. We've just, like, swapped them around.
Okay, so I've got to be kind of careful with this.
That you don't spoil anything?
Yeah, so I'm gonna read this. Because this is, like, a little snippet of him talking about making, like, Eastern street slang. Eastern street slang is that it was one thing about Eastern street slang is that it was devised by those who spoke it in order to be intentionally obtuse, so it was hard for people to understand, and so there are a lot of nonsense words thrown in the middle, but it's also got reversed grammar. Wasing the wanting of doing the thing is I wanted to do that.
Wasing the wanting of doing the thing?
Wasing the wanting of doing the thing is I wanted to do that.
Yeah, because he calls that reversed grammar, but I would, like, how is that reverse?
Yeah.
Like, wasing the wanting of doing the thing is I wanted to do that, so it's just like, want, do, thing, want to do that, wasing the wanting of doing the thing, so it's like wasing... because it's in the past. Okay, wasing the, because it's in the past, so it's like was is past, you're wasing.
Yeah.
So it's in the past, wanting of doing the thing. So everything is like in the present progressive tense, but then the actual tense of it is like seemingly presented by like wasing the wanting of doing the thing as opposed to like wanting of doing the thing.
Yeah.
Which would maybe just be like, I want to do that.
Right, instead of...
So if it was like, amming the wanting of doing the thing, perhaps, would be like, I want to do the thing, like, right now.
Yeah.
And maybe it'd be like...
Instead of... Yeah.
Yes, and maybe, like, willing the wanting of doing the thing would be like, I will want to do the thing, like a future tense, perhaps, but I don't know. Because also if they're, like, throwing in, because it's like the Cockney rhyme...
There's a little bit more to read the rest of it. But you can also throw random words in there. As long as those parts are in there, it'll make sense to those they're speaking to. I wanted to do this, wasn't the wanting of doing the thing. You're putting everything into a gerund?
Yeah, a gerund. That's starting, the ing stuff.
You're starting with a verb in the tense, and you're turning everything into ridiculously bad gerunds. That's the brief.
Yeah, so it really is just like, well, because it's gerundizing everything, like... You know, like, I like swimming.
Yeah.
And swimming is, like... Because, like, swimming is, like, you take the verb swim and turn it into a noun. Swimming. I like swimming.
Yeah.
The activity, but you've taken the activity and sort of turned it into a noun. So you take all the verbs and turn them into nouns by gerunding them.
Yeah.
But, like, it's just sort of the verbs are what's important. The verbs in the tense... And because the thing with, like, the Cockney rhyming slang is like it'll be like a rhyming thing, but it'll be like a rhyming, like, phrase. So, like, a single word will be replaced by, like, a phrase where the last thing rhymes with the original word. And so, like, there's a lot of extra sort of put in there that doesn't really mean anything, you know? It's like, I wish I could remember literally a single fucking example of actual Cockney rhyming slang. You know, where it's like, there's something that ends, I guess, in, like, ER or something that becomes, like, bread and butter.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, it goes from one word to a whole phrase. And so it's like... There's a bunch of kind of, like, extra in there that makes it a little bit harder to, like, figure out, I guess.
Yeah.
And so it's like you just throw in some random shit, but the people who know, they know the parts that are important. Yeah. And the parts that are just, like, thrown in to, like, throw other people off, I guess. Yeah. Is the idea
which is basically,
with Eastern Street slang. Yeah, because it's called Eastern Street slang, but it's essentially just a form of, like, thieves' cant.
Basically. That's what I was about to...
Yeah, so it's like he's always just sort of speaking in cant.
Yeah.
And now he's just sort of, like, not speaking in cant.
Yeah, he's basically like, my brain just died.
Mm-hmm. But you...
Yeah.
Yeah, he's, like, speaking in thieves' cant, but also, like, if you were to take Eastern Street slang, because it really seemed like early on that was just how he talked.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't even, like, know how to not talk in thieves' cant, essentially.
Yeah.
Like, how to actually, like, form phrases that weren't in that. So, like, Eastern Street slang, if left to its own devices, separate from the rest of the... I almost said English-speaking, but...
Yeah.
Weird future terrace version that they speak is like we know it's a descendant of the terrace language.
Yeah.
So, you know, modern terrace.
Yeah.
You know, it's like separated from modern terrace, Eastern Street terrace.
Yeah.
Would eventually just kind of become its own, like, you know, dialect with its own, like, it would just become its own language. Even more so than it already has, because it's like it's a very, like, formed dialect. Yeah. Part of it is that it is a cant, but also part of it's like if you, like, he was literally growing up in it.
Yep.
And so at a certain point it would just be his language.
Yep. And he didn't really have anyone outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
sort of like
his
community.
family, from, like, what we've seen from this, his family is, like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't really have a reason to speak anything else, to, you know.
Right. Yeah. Which is interesting because, like, at such a young age, although, because, like, he was really young when that happened. Like, how young was he?
I don't know.
Because the thing
is... It just says a boy.
Because it's, like, he would have had to have, like, really developed all of his... Because the thing is that he would have then been removed from that community and no longer been around a community of people who speak it. So everything he would have been speaking would have been based solely on, like, what he learned then.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you know, would he have had enough sort of linguistic development in order to even say everything that he needed to say? But if it is mostly just sort of like a cant that you, like, you take the language as it is and turn it into that, if he knew the language well enough to turn it into that.
So he's over 10.
He's over 10. Okay.
At this point.
Yeah, that's old enough, I'd say. you've kind of got your language at that point.
He was dirty, ragged thing, like most other Ska children in the Final Empire. Too young to be put to work in the mines, he spent his days ducking away from his mother's care and running around with the packs of children who foraged in the dry, dusty streets. Spook hadn't been that boy for some 10 years.
Gotcha.
So, at this point, he's over 10. Mm-hmm. But some few years, so probably like 14-ish, maybe, at this point.
Wait, he hadn't been that boy in some 10 years?
Yeah. Spook hadn't been that boy for some 10 years. In a way, he was aware that he was delusional, that the fever of his wounds were causing him to come in and... Oh, no, I'm stupid. This is...
Yeah, no, so 10 years ago... And so, like, how old is Spook right now?
He's...
Because in the last book, it was, like, brought up maybe... Because isn't he, like, younger than Vin? A little bit? He's, like, around Vin's age, but a little younger, right? Like, Spook at this point's maybe, like, 18, 19, 20? Because Vin was, like, 17 in book 1. And Spook was, like, her age or maybe a little younger, right? So he was maybe, like, 16, 17. And so now in this book, he's maybe, like, 18, 19.
That seems about right. I can't get, like, an exact.
Yeah.
Just 15 during the early events of the story. So during Final Empire, he's 15.
Okay. Yeah, so he'd be, like, 17 now? 17, 18 or something? He was 15 in book 1. He'd be, like... 16 in book 2, okay, 17. So
he's born in 1007.
Sure.
Just...
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's sort of because of the Final Empire. Its calendar would be based off, like, when the Lord Ruler came to power, which would have been, like, about 1,000 years ago, is what they were always saying. So born in 1007.
Okay. So it's 1025 is when Hero of Ages takes place.
Okay, so 1025, and he was born in 1007?
1020... Yes, 1007.
Yeah, so 3 years make it 1010, and then it was, in the current years, 1020 what? 1025?
Yeah.
So then 15 years on top of that, so he's 18.
Okay.
Yep, so he's 18 now, so he was like 8-ish. He was 8-ish at that time, yeah. Which is like... So it's like he would have had his sort of like...
Or a little bit older than that.
Yeah, so...
Because it says for some 10 years.
Yeah. So this was like about 10 years ago, so he would be like approximately like around 8, maybe a little older or younger. At that point, he would basically like he'd mostly have his grammar sort of set. So then at that point, it'd be like because none of the words themselves are like super different, so he'd just be like taking words that he hears and plugging them into the sort of the grammatical structure of Eastern Street slang in order to continue his sort of linguistic development. Because I was like, it'd be funny if it's like, you know, he's been so long that he goes back to like people who speak Eastern Street slang and they're like, you speak funny. Your Eastern Street slang sounds like different and weird.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if he's still like hung around them and stuff when he was with Spook.
With clubs.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, when Spook was with Spook.
When Spook was with Spook, he probably, you know.
I mean, if Spook was with Spook, Spook does speak Eastern Street slang, so he'd at least have Spook to talk to about it.
That's true. That's true. I'm getting a little sleepy.
Yeah. Episode title: When Spook was with Spook.
When Spook was with Spook.
Okay, and that's chapter 23.
Yeah, that's 23. We got one more. Chapter 24.
Yep. Chapter 24. It's funny how the last chapter was so short, but of course we spent longer on it because I got off on linguistics about it.
But, I mean, I've been wanting to talk about that with you anyway, so...
Yeah. Final chapter.
Words aren't working anymore.
No.
We've been recording for like 2.5 hours and my words aren't happening anymore.
Right. Yeah, this is a long one.
This is a long episode.
Okay, chapter 24, Milan spelling. I actually have the right spelling now.
Yes, because
I was looking at the chapter.
Yes.
You
have a few things like underlined.
I do. I have some stuff actually underlined there. Milan spelling. Use the trust itself. What is the trust? Please don't throw me in that briar patch.
Yeah.
I've written down.
Yeah.
The balance was real. The nobility were made to be different from Ska, but years of interbreeding basically undid that. Those are all of my notes for chapter 24. Because instead of notes, I actually have some things underlined. Yeah, because they're like, you know, his whole plan of getting them to give him the bones or whatever. is part of what I had with the whole "Don't throw me in that briar patch." Yes, so you'll be in prison for eternity, or at least until the Condor are destroyed. You die of starvation. That's not the easy way out. By accepting your punishment, you're doing the honorable, orderly thing. Yep. And by doing so, he would leave Milan and the others to be destroyed. So he's just like...
kind of going back and forth, like...
Yep, more of this sort of Tensoon going back and forth stuff in this chapter. And then they, like, sort of come to get him.
Yeah, and then they give him the bones, and it's like, you were to wear these to trial. What's wrong with the bones I now wear? Asked carefully, pulling over the sack, uncertain whether to be excited or ashamed.
Yep. See, there's an interesting thing, though, where it's like, he closed his eyes while feeling the chill of the cage alone in the large cavern. The place was mostly abandoned during the sleeping hours. What was the point? Even with the blessing of presence, which let Tensoon focus despite his uncomfortable confines, he could think of no way to escape the mesh cage and its fifth generation guards. The blessing of presence.
Yeah, who all bore the blessings.
The blessing of potency. The blessing of potency, and to pass through dozens of small caverns.
Who also had.
Yes, and he couldn't outrun Condra, who had the blessing of potency. So it seems like the blessing of potency makes you just, like, stronger, maybe? And then, like, blessing of presence. It says...
seems like it's...
let Tensoon focus despite his uncomfortable confines. So it's like, it lets you, like, focus your attention rather than your attention sort of being drawn to any old thing.
Yeah, and then he also thinks about it again. With the blessing of presence, he was able to mentally recount the days of his imprisonment.
Right, it's like, the blessing of presence, he can, like, it's... it's like, it's a very abstract sort of a thing. Like, it seems to give you sort of just, like, mind, just sort of, like, the ability to focus and pay attention.
Yeah.
And, like, remember, you know? It's wild.
Yeah.
And, yeah. And also, he's like, they didn't find it on him? At one point, he talks about that?
It was a different one that he said they didn't find on him.
Which one was that?
It was...
Yeah, because I know that I wrote it down earlier and, like, mentioned it, but Blessing of Awareness, maybe? No. Oh, yeah, Sir Blessing of Potency, they didn't find it on him.
Yeah.
Right, so he also has potency, right. Right, and then, so in here we have, I had underlined, the Blessing of Presence was one of the things I had underlined, and then, they intend to break your bones as part of your punishment, Varcel said, smiling. Something like a public execution, but where the prisoner lives through the process, which is such a, like, what a thought, what an image, you know.
It's a simple thing, I know, but the display ought to leave an impression on some of the younger generation.
Yep. And then, with the blessing of presence, there would be no release of unconsciousness for him. Which, interesting. It's like, it's consciousness, but you can't go unconscious. It's weird.
Yeah.
all these, I want explanations of all this, like, blessing stuff, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, and I still don't see the need for another body. No need to waste a perfectly good set of human bones.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'll be back for your current bones in a few hours, and then give him the dog bones.
Yep. A week ago, he'd spoken of how much he detested these bones, hoping that the second generation spies would carry the news to their masters. The second generation was far more traditional than Milan, even though she had found the thought of wearing a dog's body distasteful. To the seconds, forcing Tensoon to wear an animal's body would be supremely degrading.
Yep, and then he's like, you fools, you've given me exactly what I needed.
Yep, the fifth had no way of knowing that he'd given Tensoon the means he needed to escape.
Yep, so I'm very curious as to how these dog bones end up allowing him to escape, you know? Like, what it's going to be about them that lets him escape with them. I mean, there's a certain level of, like, he's more aware of the usefulness of the dog bones than they are, right? They're sort of, like, very much on this, like, human bone shit, you know?
They're very much on the human bone shit.
They're on that human bone shit. You know, at least humanoid skeletons and stuff, even if they're not actually made of human bones and whatnot. But he's like, nah, these bones, they got good shit going on for them.
Yeah.
You don't even know. But I don't know either. Like how is this gonna help exactly? You know, you're gonna be like faster because you're a dog, you know?
Yeah,
and they're too slow with their two legs, but you on your 4 legs are faster, you know? Because that is something of a thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you can, like, the more feet you have touching the ground, being able to, like, push you, the faster you can go, you know? It's like, if you have, like, the fastest you go is when a leg is pushing you. The time you spend in the air, you're going to be slowing down. So, like, having more legs to, like, push with makes you go faster. I saw a thing where there was, like, human 4-legged race.
Yeah.
Like, and that they think that, like, potentially they could end up being faster than people on 2 legs. Yeah. Which is funny.
Wild.
But you'd have to really, like, train for it because, like, you know, it's not, like, normal for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But yeah, and that's...
Yep.
That's it.
That's all the way through chapter 24.
That's all the way through chapter 24. Yeah, more Tensoon stuff. Mm-hmm. Always fun having more of this, like, Chandra stuff. I wonder where it's gonna, like, go.
Yep.
You know, hopefully, you know, he's about to break out soon, and I don't know what the story with that's gonna be. Maybe it's like, you fool, you've given me sharp teeth. Yeah. You've given me sharp teeth and claws. You've given me natural weapons.
Yep.
But yeah, so that does it for the chapter by chapter review.
Yeah.
All right. And yeah. I
think that's
I think that about does it.
Yep, we're gonna be doing up through the end of the part this next time.
Yep.
And we're changing our schedule to probably be Sundays. So.
Yep. That's the plan is Sundays, which will be a late Sunday today because we're recording on Sunday, but it'll come out. I just need to, you know, hit it with the truncate silence, hit it with the compression audio stuff, chuck it in the video editor with the image and export it. It's a long one.
Yeah, it is a long one.
It's going to take a long time for it to export and then upload. Honestly,
it may not get up until tomorrow.
It might not get up until, like, tomorrow morning. Yeah. Honestly. Yeah, because, like, by the time it's done exporting, it's probably going to be, like, close to midnight. Yep. So yes, this one will still probably be, like, late, but hopefully in the future we can, like, record on Saturday and put it up on Sunday or whatever. But yeah, this has been the bit.
It's been Let's Talk About Book.
This has been Let's Talk About Book, and now you can go forth and think about book on your own time. Feel free to, you know, like, comment, all that sort of stuff.
We were very happy. We got a comment saying that you were excited to see us back, and that was very happy.
Yeah, but it's like, oh, hey, you guys are back, and it's like, yeah, you know. And I'll post on Blue Sky as well. Yep. I think I have like I want to call it a tweet because it's like because it's just...
Look, Twitter is not called Twitter anymore. It can be called a tweet over on Blue Sky.
Yep, a little tweeting butterfly.
He's too good for tweets.
Too good for tweets. But yeah, I think I have one of my few that exist is just like, oh yeah, we post on like Wednesdays, and I'm gonna have to go back and see if I can edit it to be like Sundays.
No, we don't.
No, I don't. Ugh. Like I made it, and then immediately we're like, actually, let's change our schedule. We're very professional over here. Very, very well done. But anyway. Have a nice whatever time it is wherever you are.
Have a lovely day.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.